we should start early because Germans do so as well.
Absolutely. So it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Gitta, Kristin, Martin, and myself to our evening session today, which is on social media competence and communication in times of crisis. And Ulrike, I know you are very keen to share, but will you allow me first to share my slide?
Now I have to put it off again. That was the wrong one. I thought I was supposed to do it now.
Oh, fine. Oh, fine. We will let you know. So, as you see, we have some marvelous speakers coming up for you in a few minutes. But before Kristin and I will give you a little introduction into FORMWELT and into the conference. So the session this evening is actually part of the Stream Around the Clock conference We Need a Change, organized and initiated by the FORMWELT Institute in cooperation with Leanbase. And we are welcoming you to this evening session. Kristin and I, we will speak a few words later about ourselves. But first of all, about the conference itself. So the idea behind is that we have 4 currents in our time right now. And the conference aims to bring those 4 currents together. So the systemic society perspective, climate and sustainability, transhumanism, and new leadership and new economy. And our idea is to enable dialogue, exchange, and joint actions for a better future. So actually to get everyone out of their areas where they are in, but and bring them into a dialogue where they are learning from each other and developing on each other's ideas. Behind the conference is the FORMWELT Institute, which is led by Gitta Pine. And the aim of the FORMWELT Institute is to promote specialized, renewing, innovative research projects and applications within and from the field of humanities system theory and scientific mathematical theory of complex systems. The main focus of the work is the development and construction of bridges in space and time, in communication and mind, to carry both science and humanities into the future, to evaluate achievements effectively, to critically analyze what needs to be provided and shape the world in an active cooperation. If you would like to know more about FORMWELT Institute, please visit the webpage that we have mentioned below. For today, we are planning to have an interactive session with you, which will have a distinct structure. So first of all, after the introduction, which we are about to finish, we will be welcoming and introducing our guests. And then our keynote speaker, Ulrike, will have time to present her keynote. And afterwards, we will invite all our guests in an alphabetical order by last name, because everything needs to have its order, to also give their statements and ideas and views on the topic. Afterwards, we will take a small break and then start the open dialogue, where we will also have some questions from our YouTube channel audience in that Kristin and I will bring in. And this is maybe a good moment, Kristin, to also say hello. And would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thank you very much, Rebekka. Yes, I appreciate that. So I'm more than happy to be part of this conference and act as an organizational right-hand woman with Gitta and FORMWELT Institute in general. After working as an executive search consultant that soon gave not enough sense to my life, I started a research journey, what is really important in life. And I'm still on this journey, and I will stay there, I think. Now, as a coach, facilitator, and conscious business trainer, I met Gitta last year and resonated immediately with her ideas to face world's challenges via communication. So I urgently wanted to join. So Rebekka, it's up to you. Nice to work with you the first time tonight.
Absolutely. I also enjoy that, and this will be an interesting ride. I am Rebekka Manos. I'm a trainer and coach for leadership, transformation, and mindfulness. And actually, I came across FORMWELT Institute and Gitta's research by surprise, coincidence, but I was totally and absolutely overthrown by her commitment and her ideas to change the world. And that's where I said, okay, I have to be part of this. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight, and an honor as well to, be able to share the stage here with so many interesting, brilliant people. And Kristin and my role will be to guide you through the session tonight, to make sure everyone has enough space and room to share their opinions and thoughts. So you will please allow us also sometimes to be a little bit stricter on you and moderate the discussion in a way that everyone gets to speak. Having said that, it's maybe a good moment to also share a few welcoming words from Gitta, Kristin.
I will give the whole statement of her. So she's of course very unhappy not to join here, and but she gave me a written statement instead of presenting it herself, and that's what I prepared for the moment. But when I'm speaking at the moment, I just say hello to the two Dominics, our guests we have always on the chat the last 2 days. Hello.
Hello, Dominic. Twice.
Rebekka.
And hello, Dominic.
Rebekka, you want to start introducing Ulrike?
Okay. I thought you were starting with Gitta, but then let's start with the guests first.
No, with the statements after the keynote, I include Gitta's thoughts.
Okay. Very good.
Sorry, there were some organizational changes, and we hope you be flexible with us. Let's rock complexity.
Yes, please humor us a bit tonight. So, yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Ulrike Krämer to you, our keynote speaker for tonight. Born in Germany, Ulrike grew up between England and South Africa. She is a manager with more than 25 years experience in international companies and worked for more than 300 brands and companies as a cross-media consultant. She uses her broad experience to support many NGOs projects as communication manager. Ulrike has won several awards and been member of many well-known juries. And she calls herself the Generation Ambassador, or Connector for Generations in English. And she builds bridges between different generations, from Generation Z to best agers. She fights ageism for more equality rights and for longer participation in working places and a better understanding of all generations and companies in an older growing society. Ulrike, we are very pleased to welcome you tonight.
Yes, thanks a lot. So happy to be with you. And also, of course, the same story, just like you said, Rebekka. I was so happy to learn to know Gitta, and it splashed into my life. And, and I also saw that all those themes are, of course, also my themes. And it doesn't matter on what point of view we are taking through these themes, but at least it's important to stay in communication process. And that's why my keynote today will also be a part of this communication. And I hope we get a lot of people to come and hear and discuss and be with us. And thanks for my wonderful speech companions in this panel. I'm very impressed and happy to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrike. So I continue introducing Neil. Neil has an ability which is so important in these times of crisis, and I really resonated with. He's described by being a multi-perspectival listener and a synthesizer deeply aware of our social, ecological, economic, and climate predicament. Neil's pictures and poetry empathize with the human condition and channel grief and love for Gaia, including humanity, during this period of almost inevitable social ecological collapse. As a colleague said, he draws out, accepts, embraces, and holds complexity rather than pushing it away or trying to prematurely break it into pieces or otherwise control it. And he hears people in their voice, at their rhythm, and in their colors and textures and tones, and reflects back to them the underlying meaning and intent of their communication, often amplifying the essence of what they sought to express far beyond the limits of the words they themselves knew to use. Very deep words. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank my friend Kylie Stedman for those wonderful words. It's nice to feel seen. Thank you, and welcome to all the panel members.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Göran Hielscher to you. And Göran is the CEO of the Inspiracy Group, a creative name, where he coaches people and organizations for successful and authentic communication to enable them for more functional teams and valuable innovation. As a scanner personality, someone with multiple interests and talents, he has been exploring design, copywriting, communication consulting, and very interestingly, wrote his thesis on metaphors in online dating. Göran, we want to know more about that later after the talk. And he worked for years as a certified innovation and communication coach. When he's not doing that, he follows his music passion as a DJ, and Göran lives in the area of Berlin, Germany. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
So I continue with Jeffery. Jeffery is a psychologist with varied pursuits and interests. I just can pick a few for your introduction. As first looking in the world of finance, Jeffery later pursued his interest for clinical psychology. Since then, Jeffery has been a clinical director for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and an adjunct professor, co-owned a large private practice, and has pursued other entrepreneurial interests. He and his wife recently built a log retirement home on wooded acreage. Two of Jeffery's interests are permaculture and the use of health information technology and biotechnology to provide free concierge health services for individuals globally via their smart devices. He's currently writing a book which is dedicated to casting a fresh light on the human experience while embracing the complexity of human psychology. Jeffery's goal is to write this book such that people from unrelated fields can grasp the complex concepts. Very welcome, Jeffery.
Thank you very much.
So, and then there is Alex. Hi.
Hi.
Alex Schleber, he lives in Frankfurt, Germany. We saw him already yesterday. He's a researcher, strategist, and consultant centered around organizational psychology and neuroscience. He's something of a strategic art director, helping others to create their brand, product innovation, and marketing from the one holistic strategic intent. Alex is a global citizen, lived many years in the US, and he's father of a 1-year-old. And last year, he decided to put his expertise primarily in the service of climate emergency. Warm welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And then last but not least, we are very happy to have Nadja Tjahja with us on the panel as well. And I know you accepted the invitation on a very short notice, so we are even more happy to have you and see you here tonight. And I have been quite impressed by your CV as well, so it's a pleasure to introduce you. Nadja is the CEO of Sunium, where she advocates for using systems thinking methods and tools to solve complex problems. She is also a PhD fellow at the United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies and the Vrije University of Brussels, working on the legitimacy of multi-stakeholderism in internet governance. Previously, she was the Vice President Communications at Young European Leadership and agency coordinator of the 2016 prize-winning online international source verification and fact-checking campaign Newsworthy. She was a steering committee member for the UN Youth Coalition on Internet Governance from 2017 to 2019. A warm welcome to you, Nadja, as well. I'm looking forward to the panel.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be joining, and I look forward to all the discussions this evening.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Rebekka. And I think we can continue with the keynote, right?
Absolutely. So Ulrike, now it's your time to share your screen.
I was waiting. Yeah. Is that
Would
there?
you just let us know how much time you have planned so we can plan accordingly in the background?
I was thinking it's going to take about 10 to 15 minutes, more or not.
Perfectly.
That was what I was told. That's why I actually prepared it this way. But we can later on discuss as we planned it.
Perfect.
Yeah. I have so many interesting people after me, so it's much more inspiring for me to hear the others later on. No? Mm-hmm. Yes, so thanks a lot. Stream around the clock, we need a change. And today, on Saturday, we have the big new theme, social media in the crisis, as I said it, communication and generational understanding. And as you see, this is the hashtag I use in Germany. Well, I think the most people can also understand it in other countries, but in this case, as I do live in Germany, it's also important that the hashtag gets to those people I'm working together with. And they are in the moment often in Germany. Yes, we have here the, I must put your kind face, Rebekka, a little bit to the side so that I can see my slide. We have the themes economics, climate, digitization, and new work. And all these themes are themes we find in social media. And we, of course, all know how important these channels are getting. And we are rocking this together, or we are already separating each other as generations fall apart, giving each other the fault, arguing instead of inventing together or finding matching solutions. And we can ask ourselves, will the next selections be won in social media? I mean, we've had a lot of books about that already, Obama and so on. He was doing a lot of his selection work in social media. And as we know, a very famous man with a funny hairdress also loves Twittering, and not always in a form like we would like to have it, and often separating. And we can also ask ourselves, is old publishing business dying here? Because of course, social media is taking over publishing business. And it's of course a discussion. Is it open space? Is everybody now a publisher? And as lots of publishing business houses are trying still to fight and to say, no, we are the publishers. And if we publish, it is right. And it's not good that everybody is publishing. That is, of course, a very important discussion, and there is no answer to that, no answer to the end for that. And my last thesis is, will wars start here one day? Not Sarajevo, where there were maybe some rumors, whatever, to start the First World War or the Second. And here we have the fact that if we do mistakes or if we aren't diplomatic enough between the countries, that maybe also one day one of the right-wing people start getting really angry and then starting a war. We have seen in the crisis that social media has even increased, and it was 43% worldwide, where we saw that it was even increasing. We had 30% live streams of events provided. We had 68% providing fact-checked content to help people cope with the outbreak. And we had 66% screening fake news. And that is, of course, also a big danger. And the age of these people in that crisis here, what I was saying, just the facts and figures, they are between 16 and 64 years old. Worldwide, we have 3.96 billion people on social media, worldwide, active, global people, population. And I would say, if we look at the further facts and figures, we will also find out that in countries where we don't have so many different pools and tools, and possibilities of education, that the number is even higher than in populations where you have all kinds of tools you can use. So social media is a growing communication tool, number one, globally, and it is important to watch its intense impact on the increase and the solution of crisis, because we know we can stop crisis and we can start crisis. I have here a little overview just to give you a few channels. I've taken 3 of them because they are, for my theme in the moment, I think the most important, because if we are talking about content, I'm now in the moment talking about written content and facts and figures. So I've taken here Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, because they are well known for written publications. And in the first case, I will come to Facebook, the largest community, 2.7 billion monthly users, and 12% increase daily. Even now in the crisis, we had an increase. I mean, you know yourself that everybody, especially also in Germany, people are saying Facebook is dying. No, it is increasing worldwide. And daily 1.79 billion users, 98% are outside the US. That's maybe also interesting, because I mean, Facebook was founded in US and 90% are outside of the US. Twitter, we can look how many users we have in US. We have 62.55 million users. In Japan, I've only got the countries which are the strongest on Twitter. Of course, other countries are following, but I'm just giving you a view which are the strongest nations working on Twitter. And if you now think about selections, and you can see that 62.55 million users are in the US, then you know exactly why you have to be on Twitter. Japan has 49.1, Brazil 15.7, UK 15, 25, Turkey 12.7 million, India 17 million users, and Saudi Arabia 12 million users. And here you can see those aren't countries which have really all tools and all channels and all possibilities to be educated. There you can see that there are also countries who really use Twitter and social media to be educated and informed. That's very important to know. That's why I thought it's quite interesting to see and to point on that. And for YouTube, we have over 2 billion monthly watchers. This year, we'll reach 79% of interest in traffic and second biggest search machine. So not only Google is the search machine, but also YouTube is used as a search machine. So if we are now preparing content, because we were always talking about, in our theme, we had the theme communication, but we also had the difficulty, is everybody capable of using the channel in the right form? And if you see here, in this case, YouTube is also a search machine, then you know exactly why you have to think about placing and wording. That's the most important, tagging, wording, and hashtagging your information on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook right, so that you are found. Because if you have your own bubble, and that is what we have, the most of us have a bubble. We have our private people around us. For instance, in Facebook, we first started with family, friends, whatever. And later on, the community, also our own community for those of us who are long years, as I, on all kinds of channels. I'm on very, very many channels. I'm on Pinterest, I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube, Facebook, I'm even on TikTok and LinkedIn, Sing, and I'm just thinking Instagram, of course. And all these channels are important to understand how do they work, over which tool do they work? Do they work more over wording, or do they work more over pics or do they work more over in the meantime motion? And motion is the big tool in the moment, because everywhere where you now place motion pics or motion films, with interviews, but also with yourself, just a quick snack content, we call it. It's just for a few seconds or a few minutes. We just give a little bit free lessons or free content onto the users. And then, for instance, also on LinkedIn and some places where the motion was not so popular yet. For instance, Twitter was only mostly with link, or Insta now has really new, or Insta story, Twitter LinkedIn story is starting. So we can see video is getting very prominent. So I will say now this, are you still communicating or already hating? Because if you are in your bubble, you are often communicating, but you must of course know that if you go on Twitter, you are not communicating with your bubble. You are communicating to convince others. Otherwise, you can go somewhere else. So some people who then say, we have the first politicians in Germany, a green politician, Robert Habeck, he has said, I'm not staying on Twitter. They are hating me. And that is the wrong situation, because he's a politician to be talking to the people. He's supposed to be communicating, and he is supposed to be seeing what the others are thinking of him and how they understand him and how his political ideas are the right ones. Is he still in the reality, or is he in his green bubble, whatever? So in that case, it's very, very interesting to see how can we react, or how are we reacting, and how do we learn from early on, how do we learn to communicate in the right way, so that we then, if we come to these points, I've written down the ones I've come upon, because of course, if you are as I am, I'm a consultant, I'm in advertising since long-term years, actually all my business life, and of course, being in education with students, I'm of course also in all channels. That's the point. That's why I'm on TikTok also. That's why I'm practicing all channels, because I want to know what I'm teaching. I want to know what I'm communicating, and I want to know what I am telling my clients to use and how to use it. And you can't do that when you don't test and try out. It's trial and error. And you must find out, how do the people react and what do they do? And it's also important then to know, how can I build up my own wording for a hashtag. This in the front is the hashtag, for those who don't know, for our people watching us. And it has to sit exactly next to the word. Lots of people have a space between, then it isn't a hashtag anymore. And this hashtag, the first one, is often used from people who talk about hate. And then they say hate speech. I don't think that somebody who's really hating, that he puts himself a hate speech hashtag, but maybe this can also be. And of course, we also have initiatives, War of Words, or Stop Hate for Profit, or free speech. There the people say, why should it be stopped? We want to talk as we are. We want to say everything we're allowed to say. And we don't want the politicians or the state to tell us who's allowed to say what. So in the end, free speech is democratic, or others say free speech is not possible. We have to do more things so that the people aren't getting too hated. And the okay boomer, I've already had once a real shitstorm, because I had said something about the Generation Z, and then suddenly, I'm not saying who it was, but it was someone with a colored hair. He suddenly said, okay, boomer. And with this hashtag, in a few minutes time, everybody was shitting me. And they didn't even know what I had said. They were just always repeating, yes, he's right, and whatever. And it was terrible. And so in the end, it means the boomer is the baby boomer. It's the generation the best ager generation, and it is the generation from 45 up. And this OK Boomer is from social media, and it is something the Generation Z use to say that they don't understand the boomers, and the boomers are old-fashioned and conservative, and they should shut their mouths, and they have no idea what's really running and whatever. So that is also the big theme I have as a generation ambassador, that I want to work on these things, because I think it's the most important thing, even if we are different generations and even if we are different ages. These people, they don't know what steps we've taken, and they don't know our life, and they don't know, I don't know that from the others either, actually. But in the end, we have to learn to have more tolerance and respect for each other, and we have to see that the hater does not go on. So this was an initiative from brands and or for brands and companies, and also speaking with Facebook to stop the hate for profit. And the question was, will social media platforms help change communication or further their profit in the name of freedom of speech? That's why I've just put that inside, because it's actually to show there are these kind of initiatives, but the question is always who is naming them, and are they better in the way they communicate? Because often you see that the initiatives are started from people who are actually very intolerant. And that's why it is difficult to say this is good or bad. And often the hashtags are then used from other organizations, and in viral campaigns or in social media channels, everything is possible. And you can't, once a message is out, it's out. You can't really control it anymore. So my idea is, what can we do to turn communication powerfully? Here I'm giving free hugs, more love, no hate, but that's of course a dream. But as we see, the young people, they also have these dreams. And I think it's difficult to see, because we see now that also in these initiatives like Fridays for Future or whatever, we also see that there are very aggressive people between. And of course, here are a few people saying, I want to hug you. But on the other side, they would send off hate or hate speech tweets and whatever to other people, because they are then outside the bubble, and they don't want these people. They don't want other opinions. And we have to practice pro and con and discussing with each other again. Whoops, that's not going on. And so the idea is, the more we invest in diversity matters, in communication, in education skills, the better generational and global conflict conversations can be optimized. Understanding each other's wishes, fears, views, and values will allow different generations to increase their appreciation of another. And competence areas for better usage of social media is, as I said already, it's always different. Every channel needs a different communication skill, and also, of course, the will to try these new communication skills, because of course the elderly, they aren't capable of all these usage, but that's why I'm also a friend of telling everybody to try it out themselves and to practice, because as everything, you can learn. The brain is like a muscle. It can work till over 80, over 100, whatever. And so it's exactly the same with the usage of social media. Everybody, even the elderly, have computers at work or had computers at work. So it's just a thing to take up and to try to keep the conversation going. There appear to be differences in the values and the beliefs and the opinions between different generations of people. While some believe strongly in the differences, others believe they are the myth. Those believing in the differences assert that they are important to recognize and accommodate, especially in settings having multiple generations, such as in workforce, says Robert Half Company analysis. And here we can see where the main generational differences are. First of all, we have with 30% the different communication skills. Just to say, and we heard it yesterday also from Gitta, it's of course not so nice, and I saw it at university as well. When I was teaching the last 15 years, I was leading the Institute of Design, Hamburg, Berlin, Düsseldorf, and I had students in the creative areas, in copywriting, in graphic design, and in multimedia. And it was terrible to see how bad the communication skills are developing in every case. And we don't have to talk about it further, but that the German language is turning down, we know, all of us. And the ability to adapt to change is also a difference in the generations. And 26% we have found out don't want the change, and they can't adapt so quickly anymore. And the technical abilities are 23%. And here in the technical abilities, if we just come down to digitization, and if we come to the channels, we must see, for instance, that you in Insta, you really have to, in the meantime, bring out good photos, for instance. Or if you only do stupid photos, or where the quality isn't the right, or you haven't got the right themes, or you, if you are now doing Insta story, you don't use GIFs, or you don't, if you are on TikTok, you must be a little bit more crazy, you must be dancing around, and you must make joke of yourself and whatever. And that is on the one side, the technical side, but on the other side, also the ability to adapt, also to be your own joke, for instance, if it is the right way to communicate with Generation Z on TikTok, for instance. No? If you do it targetable, adaptable in form and style to social media channel. So we really, really have to practice more, and not only at school, we have to practice more and earlier. Also, of course, in the higher generations, the parents and the grandparents have to practice more, because otherwise they will lose the contact to their own children, to their own grandchildren. And they are always complaining that the children are on the handy. But if you go to the museum, why don't you adapt the form, how museums are? I was just in a museum now in Berlin, the Nature Museum, and I was very, disappointed, because I mean, we had the dinosaur there, but I thought it was very old-fashioned, the whole form and the whole style. And even I am now the generation 50 plus, but even I was expecting it to be much more multimedial and much more interesting and interactive and so on. And I didn't understand why I can't go there with a QR code, or I couldn't do myself anything. Of course, I was standing before one of those huge bones and had my selfie. But I'm really saying, why isn't there an interactive generational communication form, so that there is interesting stuff for the very young ones and interesting stuff for the elderly? So it would make the whole thing for education, it would make it much more interesting and bring people to go there. What I think is quite interesting is the German Tagesschau, the television news. The German television news is called Tagesschau at a special time of the day, and it is extra channel for the Generation Z, so that they don't stop using news. So Tagesschau thought, okay, then we go to TikTok, although it is Chinese, and there you of course have the discussion, is that manipulating, are they using our data, and what is happening with our stuff and whatever. But they didn't think long, they just started doing it, and there were again two groups of discussing in the society. The one group said, oh, they're making themselves to adapt. Here in this case, you can see that was a whole funny film where the speaker suddenly had all kinds of different ties on, and he was laughing, and everybody said, that is not serious, it's not news. And they say it's nonsense, and the other ones say, oh, it's a good idea to have a form which makes it more interesting, and they really have a lot of followers, and it is actually in cases of followers and in cases of finding ways to conform themselves better to the generation, they have a success. And so this is what I'm saying. So I'm coming to the end. Open networks and more education. When people feel heard, understood, and valued, they are more likely to cope with others, listen, learn more, and communicate broader ideas than before. We must stop the thinking bubbles and open our networks and educational needs for more people. Working on general value and understanding starts communicating better at home, at school, at college, in society, in politics, and much more than now in companies. Companies must see the value of coming into communication processes, in giving money to poorer families, because we have a high percentage of poor families in Germany and worldwide. It's not only in poor countries. We are in those cases poor countries because we have poor families, poor mothers and poor children. So we have to do a lot of stuff, giving in material and also the hardware and the software, because that is very expensive. Also now in the times of homeschooling, we saw that lots of kids were not on computers and without internet in their housings, and so they could not go to school in Corona, and that's not what we are thinking about. So Fridays for Future was also a hashtag, and we saw how successful they were on the streets and how successful they were also with their worldwide global social media campaign. And so we can see that this is not only an example for the young ones, it's an example. In my case, I'm selling this to the elderlies. I'm saying you must try to connect, and you must try to come into the discussion and into the communication. So take up more friends, let people come into your network, open up for discussions and try to hold them, and then the world will be a better place. Yes, so I'm already at the end of my discussion or my performance, and I'm happy to hear the others now. And I give my word on to Rebekka, I think. And I want to thank you.
Absolutely. We would like to thank you, Ulrike, for this very concise talk on social media, giving us a good view on what's going on in the world, and also having us in the background already chatting about how we are breaching between different channels. So that was quite interesting.
Oh yeah, wonderful. Now it's out. Yes. Hello.
Hello again. I have 2 comments from the audience. First of all, one audience member was just letting us know that sometimes we might be using the German term handy when we are speaking about mobile phones. So just to let everyone know of the native speakers that the misuse of an English sounding word in German. Just to give you that.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Yes, of course. We of course always talking about this, no? The second and the third and the fourth screen, which is also lying next to my place now. Okay.
Absolutely. And we are also seeing some traffic already on the YouTube channel. But we just received the message that Jeffery has some issues with his battery, and his battery is low. So we thought we could maybe all go with a little bit of flexibility and give Jeffery the first stage, the first space to give and share a few words and thoughts of his view on social media competency, and to make sure we can still hear you.
Is the first rule to have a battery? So, sorry, Jeff.
If you want to participate, yes. Jeffery, that looks already difficult.
So Jeffery wrote that he was going to ask about a charger and he will return shortly. Then he announced that he is already back, but at the moment, I'm not sure. Can you hear us, Jeffery? We can't hear you. Okay, you have to unmute.
Nothing coming.
I can't.
Okay.
Great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, I think the battery is complicating things. So I was just saying, Gita has superpowers to convince an introvert to engage in this sort of activity. And I very much appreciate her asking me to. This is very interesting for me. I have to admit, I am not a social media expert. I don't use anything but Facebook. And I've tried the others, and I'm more motivated to do so after hearing our speaker. But I think what Gita has enjoyed and wanted me to speak about is since 2009. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Now we can see you, but not hear you.
No, we can't see you.
And that looks like a dying battery,
Yes.
which
That's
is
a pity.
preventing even the smartest soul from sharing their thoughts, unfortunately.
So then let's go on with Neil, please.
Well, thanks everybody. And first of all, thanks to Gita. I think part of the interaction with Jeffery and myself was the reason that Gita invited me to come along. We've been friends on Facebook for some time, Gita and I. And I think part of it is around how you can have a respectful communication across voices of difference in a common forum in a way that demonstrates by example a different way of communicating, a different way of being, especially in these difficult times. And so as a framing mechanism, some of the things that I've heard in some of the earlier sessions of the conference, and I haven't had a chance to tune into all of it, involved looking at the use of technology, knowledge, intelligence, question marks over how much wisdom we have as opposed to just access to knowledge, and the issue of the ethics of how we use these technologies for good, for evil, for whatever, and the recognition that the technology platforms are they're platforms, they're neutral. You know, how they're manipulated, how they're used, depends on the consciousness and the awareness of the individuals involved. And so I try and bring the sort of consciousness that I would use in an everyday encounter into Facebook in a way that says, how should I communicate in a way that is going to ensure that, if possible, this person can see me authentically showing up, doing what I do, and what is it we could do together? What are the potentials that are in this space if we can both realize and recognize each other past the differences that might otherwise divide us? So I wasn't expecting to start like that, but it's sort of best segue, I think, from Jeffrey's unfortunate battery incident. I have a poem that I'll finish with at the end, and it's one of the things that I shared with Jeffery in front of Gita, and I think she loved it, and I think it'd be worthwhile sharing in this forum. My kids in Australia, I'm in Belgium for about the last 6 months, would be laughing if they knew that I was on a forum talking about social media competence, because I'm 60 years old, a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old in Australia, and at a party some years back, was being ribbed mercilessly by the kids all having their first drinks in the kitchen. And I walked in and started reading this poem, and I was told, no, that's not a poem, you got to read it in rap. And so I tried to read my poem in rap, which didn't work. And then I handed it to one of the young guys and got him to read it. And then I think what happens is that people start to recognize, especially if there's a thoughtful artifact, whether it be a beautifully constructed photograph, whether it be a beautifully constructed poem, that you've put in the inner work to convert it into something that's worthy of being seen as an object that now shows this is prior work, not just my immediate reaction. This is actually a deep response. And to me, that's a critical element of this, not just reacting to what you thought you heard, but showing that you can respond from a place of deeper experience and consciousness. So I bring that to what I do. And so being seen by Gita, being seen by Jeffery, and now hopefully being seen by you and the audience worldwide, wow, is critical, because it's not just about being seen for egotistical purposes. It's being seen for what it is that you might bring if you can find synergies. And you can't find synergies if you're not being authentic. And you can't be authentic if people can't see you showing up whole. And you can't show up whole if you're in reaction space rather than listening deeply and responding space. And so the way that I try and work this is, there's a wonderful writer, Peggy Holman, who's written a book called Engaging Emergence. And I believe that we can facilitate emergence coming from a complexity perspective. I know Nadja has that complexity lens as well, and systems lens. You know, a flock of starlings creates a murmuration through simple rules, but they're each moving independently, but they're reacting and responding to the movements of the others. And I think that we can create conditions where we can start to see ourselves in motion and evolve as a whole system. So part of the trick here is to disrupt false coherence compassionately. And this is one of the beautiful steps that Peggy Holman talks about. The first step is disrupt coherence compassionately. The second is engage disruptions creatively. So now that you've disrupted, now how do you pick that up? And the third is, how do you renew coherence wisely? So if you've now stirred people up and changed what they were thinking, if they're sitting in the wrong place having a picnic on the railway line, where are you going to take them to, right? There's got to be a better place. So there's an away from and a towards. And in terms of crises, we're in the midst of social ecological collapse. Let's not pretend. We've got people at different levels of acceptance of that, different levels of awareness of that, different levels of denial of that. And if I can't walk into a room, tune into where people are at, identify with that because I've been there myself, recognize that I might have some compassion to bring to them, hold them in that space as they go to the next stage of their awareness, and then do something about it, then I can't really hold space for social media competence in the time of a crisis. So I know I've taken 5 minutes now in my brief process, but if I can finish, perhaps I'm just checking with Rebekka nodding, yeah. There's more that I could bring, but I hope to bring that to the conversation later. I would have preferred to have gone last because I'm more of an integrator and synthesizer. But the introduction to this poem is that before LinkedIn destroyed its capacity for proper communication as an online channel like Facebook allows at least some communication with longer quality posts, by shortening it down, not going quite as far as Twitter, we had a 10,000 comment 3-year conversation on paradigm shift in the sustainability professionals group. And I was part of that. So in 2014, I wrote this, and it was part of the way of bringing to the attention of multiple divergent voices that we're all in this together. And I was deliberately throwing something in that was neutral to the conversation, but each of them got. And this is the one that I can't read and wrap, but I'll give it a shot to read properly. So this is a poem about participation in social media dialogue, and I call it, Why Do I Come Here? I come here to masticate, to chew things over mate to mate, investigate and cogitate, deliberate and correlate. It's not just words, it's not all lies, divergent voices theorize. For each new view a thread provides, a crucial link, a pile of lies. It doesn't matter. For each surprise or compromise, might enlighten or comprise, patterns found through group endeavour, a tapestry we weave together. Divergent views reverberate and separate and feed debate. At times we find we each dictate, gesticulate, sometimes berate, and agitate and activate, force those that care to correlate, and those that don't to postulate and imitate, adjudicate. So theorise, differentiate, see each part, discern, relate, internalise the ones that matter, adopt a stance that does not shatter this fragile space we share together. Let's co-imagine something better. Then ask yourself, why do you come? To make a point or steal a run? Sometimes to procrastinate, sometimes more. To masturbate? To self-inquire, refine your views, to walk a mile in others' shoes? To find some friends and share the news, or through trust, make colleagues new. Beyond debate, we correlate. Converging minds, we integrate. We co-define our language better. We co-design, make things that matter. Through dialogue, we realise and synthesise and crystallise divergent bits of different size, include the truths, reveal the lies. Dialogue is circular and sometimes perpendicular. As tangents sprout and sidetracks form, From me to you, to me, then on and round it goes. With love, a spiral, not death throes. The words may grow, someone might shout, a song may form, a poem sprout. Actions speak, but words still matter. Most don't work without the latter. So as we forge through stormy weather and navigate our way together, we trust our friends to activate, back us up as mate does mate, continue to communicate and agitate, rejuvenate, and strive always to correlate. One thing I ask, my dearest mates, please don't just act, deliberate. For when you do, you'll find your way, and maybe others with whom to play. It happens each and every day when people gather to have their say. So I'm really interested to see what is it we could do together that we can't do alone. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Neil. A very, very wonderful poem and absolutely fitting, I think, to our conversation tonight and also to the topic. And yes, we would have loved to hear it in rap, of course, but still.
I'll work on it.
Perfect. Next time.
Or I can give it a go now if you like. No, I'm kidding.
That would be lovely, actually. That has been very moving, but still, we would like to ask our next guest to give an insight into his thoughts and opinions. And actually, Göran, you would be the next one on my list. So if you would like to share a few words, thoughts, slides, if you would like to, that's also totally welcome and allowed, but you don't have to, of course.
So like referring to social media as like the universal realm we are talking about, or more specific. I just made some like lean notes on that. So in the first, like in the first place, I think somehow, by my perception, it's the right label to call them social media, and on the other hand, it's sometimes like a misnomer. So because we can see it connects people, but also it takes them away from each other, or takes them away from real social connection. So how do I come to this conclusion? So for me, it's very interesting because, you know, like I have I would say like kind of an abundant lifestyle that brings me to corporates and SME, to that world. I'm part of like a great conscious community here in Austria, where I reside right now since 1 year and a half, just like part-time. I'm in Berlin as a DJ for ecstatic dance, which is kind of a like more conscious dance format. So no alcohol, no talking, no shoes, barefoot. I'm connected to like ways of community, of connecting that I can't experience in the digital realm. And so what I would love to bring to this discussion is a perception, or like more awareness when we are talking about it, from a backstage, front stage perspective. Because we talk about that we need abilities to deal with all that, and how to use this media, and so on and so on. And of course, we have digital gaps, not just about like among generations, or between, let's say between, not among generations, in using social media, but also, of course, like between groups of interest. And we have to take in consideration, and it was a topic like I was like investigating a little bit. What is the purpose of the social media channels that are offered to us? Because I read it was almost like a punchline. We are not the users or the clients of social media. We are the product, or let's say the fuel of it. They contribute in very beautiful ways to our lives, of course. So, but we really have to realize that, of course, we fuel an industry that is taken over, or even like surpassing other industries that have been much bigger the ages before. So for me, the competency when we are talking about social media is also like to be very, very, very aware what's happening here. And I think what absolutely should be part of that discussion is a focus on the moral perspective that most of all these great companies and to find a balance about that, they employ, I mean, not just dozens, probably hundreds of psychologists, neurobiologists, and so forth, to investigate, to find out how to keep us there, like how to trigger our dopamine cycles, and what does that mean, and what that implies for the social experience that happens here in the screen and for the social experience that happens outside. And there's like many structural things I started thinking about that were not, in my opinion, so often, like how can I say, like commented. For instance, here in Zoom, I see all of you, but I can't look any one of you in the eye. I can chat with people endlessly, but who does say that the little box I have there in Facebook and Skype, wheresoever, totally fits to my need of communication, gives really the space of it. Speaking really of a rectangle, is this big enough to express myself, and so forth. So there's like structural dimensions in social media that are so genuine or so innate that we are not much talking about them, but we don't know how much they take us away from a way of communicating that is more innate or more human. I won't say that social media is human, because this is part of our nature, that we achieved all these technologies and we were driving them to an existential level. But of course, I can see, like, being a part of this diverse communities, of this diverse worlds, that of course, like the generations, even like sometimes with a distance of just like 10 years, not even 20, cope very differently with all these technologies. And coming back to your, I think, like, to our mutual curiosity, because you asked me about like these metaphors in online dating. This is a very interesting example, like how our agents or our behaviors on dating and mating have changed in the last 20 years, since we have OkCupid, Tinder, Match.com, and so forth. And of course, it's a big contribution. But I mean, like 15 years ago, you would have been labeled as an insane weirdo using those channels or offerings. Whereas like last year, Tinder started a big campaign and plastered London, Paris, Berlin with a big billboard or poster, which just stated single, not sorry. So there's a big paradigm shift in how we see relationships, which is absolutely fueled by those platforms. Yeah. And it's very interesting, because we have now really AI applications that found out that the swipe time totally like decreased in Tinder. It got down from 10 seconds to 1/10 of a second or something in the last, since the existence of Tinder, for instance. Or that there is when we look at the perceptual plane or perceptual dimension of all of that, that there are priorities that you can investigate on with AI or with crawlers. So there were like billions of pictures taken, and we can see now that women, like coming from the cis spectrum, so to say, have a tendency to don't like men staring straight to the screen, or being like fully like in the screen like that, whereas the other way around, it's preferred by men. So there's so many things coming up with all that. So, and I'm very happy, of course, to be part of that community, to get some tools or some thoughts or like ways of thinking to cope with all these very interesting things that happen to us or that we make happen. So, but yeah, just to conclude that, in a way, I love when we talk about the social media, we have to talk about the backstage and the front stage part of it. And what I was missing somehow, like in the labeling of this event tonight, to provoke a bit more of a question or a chain of thought, not communication in the time of crisis, I would say like communication crisis in times of crisis. So I heard a yes, I saw a yes without like hearing you, especially Alex, just like saw you nodding. So this is very interesting, because like, where is really the deep talk? Where is the ability to just like be aware of each other, you know, like this is because people have avoidance of eye contact, people have avoidance of proximity, people feel, especially now with the narrative of a so dangerous virus of skin contact, and we are like foreseeing a future probably where this is considered to be normal, and I already like perceive tendencies where, well, I'm convinced people will just forget what that was, what we had, if we don't nurture it and maintain it. Yeah, so the meaning of the analog in times of the digital is increasing as well. Period.
Perfect. Thank you, Göran. And actually, thank you for also bringing in a provocative note to this talk tonight, which absolutely is what we are looking for, and which I think will also be subject of the discussion that you will be having together later on after the statements. Thanks a lot. I think it's absolutely vital to talk about the backstage and the front stage of social media. Thanks. With that, I would like to hand over to Alex, actually, is the next one in the line. You know, we are very strict here with the alphabetical order by last name. So Alex, it's your turn to go, about 10 minutes, and you already know the deal. If
yeah, you'll cut me off, that's fine.
I will cut you off, yes.
You already know the deal, I tend to go long, so that's okay too.
Cool.
All right, we'll share the screen. We got the PowerPoint here. And ready, there we go. And I'll just leave it in this easier to access view if that's okay for everyone. Hope everybody can see that. So I gave a talk yesterday, and so some of this is a continuation, but very much there are these social media elements, and you know, there's elements that my work has touched upon absolutely onto social media, and I've actually been myself a pretty heavy user of social media and Twitter since 2008. So there's kind of a long history there. There's a lot of people that have come and gone in that time, for example, on Twitter. So a lot of the users that I was once connected to there are no longer there. They've kind of given up on that particular app and medium. So anyway, so we started yesterday more focusing on the climate crisis narratives, but you know, even those are like touched by the coronavirus crisis right now, and so we're just continuing right here with more about crisis comms and, you know, how to get your message out, among other things. So what do I do specifically? I work with these archetypes, the travel mind firmware, and you can read those other elements there yourself. I've worked mostly with startups and solopreneurs, small, medium-sized businesses, and about how to create their stories. And the stories can ever increasingly, since around those days of 2006, 7, 8, would be on social media. So that's just the way the world has gone. Bringing it back to the reality for one moment, and I brought this up yesterday, obviously in the context of climate crisis, but so there is a real effect, a real world effect, by the way, here of the story of Greta, as we know, from the lone girl sitting outside of school with the little school strike to, you know, tens of thousands of people per city and millions of people in total per day on that day. I forget exactly when it was, last year in the summer, I believe, coming out. And so, you know, the digital can still affect the analog and vice versa. So that's absolutely going on, as we know. Just wanted to bring this up because this kind of motivates why I, you know, deal with these things and why I'm interested in the archetypes, because this is sort of like a very archetypal storyline. This is kind of how I look at it. You know, for example, she falls into that range of the trickster, the special child, and, you know, the very small, the asymmetry built into the thing has, with trickery or wit, intelligence, luck, sometimes, you know, can bring down titanic, large, powerful, extremely powerful forces. And there are other examples here, you know, from the olden days, from the old stories. But now we're actually very much faced with such a storyline in the persona, quote unquote, of the coronavirus. And it's very interesting to me, and here's some social media relevant stuff, you know, how, among other things, the trickster, very tiny, yet somehow asymmetrically extremely powerful, as in having brought the whole world to its knees in some ways, coronavirus, has also drowned out other figures and other communications and channels that were specifically themselves built upon that archetype. So in that sense, you know, it's kind of reined in Greta's phenomenon to an extent. And then here's, for example, the one where we have the trickster, special child, little trickster girl that stares down the bull outside of the Wall Street Stock Exchange. And even there, you know, like, won't escape. You know, that was a social media phenomenon for a moment there. And again, it doesn't escape the all-powerful influence currently of the coronavirus narrative. Okay, so that was just to minimally catch up from yesterday. And interesting enough, this is, by the way, here's a nice meme, pretty nice success on the spread of it. And this whole, you know, kind of a half a joke and sort of half in jest, fully in earnest, as we like to say, right? Who led the digital transformation of your company? Your CEO, your chief technology officer, or COVID-19? And ironically, especially in the case of a lot of German companies, I'd probably have to say, this is just so absolutely spot on and so nails it. So this has been an extreme accelerant, and of course spreads like wildfire, even more so than we would have otherwise seen through social media and digital channels. Here, you know, juxtaposed just in, you know, for comparison's sake, of older articles about how, well, you know, in Germany it's just so hard to drive digital transformation forward, and there's always too many customers that would still rather prefer to do things the old way, and so on and so forth. Okay, so here we go. I also brought this up super briefly. The point here just being, well, it is about fetishes in many ways, right? Product, branding, marketing strategies ultimately cater to our fetishes. And so here is an example of, you know, that I brought up yesterday, of how how these angles are developed and how we need to look at this kind of stuff in the case, for example, of the car world and the car culture. But more importantly, you know, once we're on that topic of fetishes and the archetypal connections to them, you know, here's an older slide of mine. Instagram. Then this may look kind of innocuous, but, you know, think about this for 1 second in detail. Think about Instagram, what it really is. It's an archetypal affinity self-identification machine. Okay, an archetypal affinity self-identification machine at a massive global scale. At a massive global scale, people identify themselves with the things that most resonate within them at a deep level, and oftentimes at a deeply unconscious level, at least as to why. Okay, so, and there we have everything from, you know, the siren archetype and all the beauty stuff and beautiful pictures and beautiful people. We have rich VIP type things and so on and so forth. Incidentally, since we brought up the museums, here's the museum angle. You know, so art, the creator archetype, for example, right? So now all of a sudden, bam, museums. A friend of mine from Twitter actually took this shot in Manhattan just a week or so ago. Manhattan is still very empty in this current state of affairs. And here you see, like, nobody has escaped it, you know. So all of a sudden, really what it's done is it has brought to a halt a lot of all of our social mythologies and these fetishes. And another term I've brought into the discussion of this stuff, and that's probably how Gitta and I think most connected some weeks, by now I guess some months back, over this idea of, you know, she's very much into reality simulation and the digital, and then I'm just into reality simulation and simulacra in general. And, you know, if you all are familiar with Baudrillard, you know, then you already know most of this, but if you're not, you know, it's just the idea that we do constantly, even in the olden days without the digital, have all these simulations of realities that are definitely at least one, if not multiple steps separated from a true ground reality. You know, Disney World being one of those, you know, key examples of that. And if we go by that, you know, then we can totally see how the coronavirus, COVID-19, has absolutely disrupted all of these simulacra. So all of these suddenly got thrown out the window. Okay, sports get canceled. Soccer, football gets canceled. And then all of a sudden you see that, well, okay, clearly they weren't system relevant, right? Hint, hint. Well, they are simulacra. People self-identify with a variety of them, again, based kind of on archetypal, core archetypal connections. But a lot of this stuff just got canceled. And then you can almost see how on social media the responses go, and how some people that are very much in alignment with certain archetype, certain simulacra around those will then respond and kind of scramble and try to figure out, you know, what to make of this new situation. One of the interesting ones that I did see the other day on Friends, you know, American Forces Network, I could see a mix of sports ball, as I call it, sports, football, baseball, basketball, and how weird it is to see these things with no audience, right? So the whole idea of, the previous speaker, Göran, was talking about front stage, backstage audience and so forth of a DJ setting or similar, right? And the whole idea that, wow, if you take away the audience, it changes so much about the entire presentation of these events, of these simulacra. Okay. Then I have another one here where, so first of all, what I wanted to point out, and thanks again for that beautiful poem by Neil, that also showed us that, you know, very much the artists can oftentimes, as I see it, sense what's truly going on. They can maybe express it in the absolutely clearest way yet, but they do sense things early, or in this case of the coronavirus suddenly coming about, they do sense at least very rapidly what's going on before a lot of other people have reoriented. That includes politicians, institutions, you know, business leaders, and so forth. So they sense things quickly, and so it's always worth listening to artists. If you have a social media team, let's say, and you're trying to create stuff for your brand, your company, whatever, you know, your teams, whatever you're doing, I would always recommend having at least like one artist voice on there that, you know, you may not constantly be using, but to just kind of keep an ear to the ground that way, and also maybe have an additional voice of somebody that's sort of like devil's advocate, or might tell you like not to do something because they just know that it wouldn't fit in the current context of whatever was going on that day or that week in the news cycles. So, and this is, by the way, from just a day or two ago from the Video Awards, which of course music video is kind of like a come and gone medium in terms of import, but it just shows that also artists are maybe first able to easily adapt to a new situation and somehow, you know, let's say rock the coronavirus, or just, you know, bring in an element like masks that would otherwise, you know, discombobulate some other people. And certainly we've seen some of that with politicians, questions around masks, and they're just like, okay, well, we're just going to put this right into our act because we're easily able to do transformation anyway. That's part of our artistry. All right. So last but not least, yeah, and I already kind of alluded to it. So the idea that COVID-19 has zero respect for any and all of our social mythologies. So these early on just all got turned off one after the other, right? March 10th, you could still see debates going on, including on Twitter, for example, about whether, you know, German soccer should still go on with ghost games or whatnot, right? Whether that was too much. Like, why can't we just still do a few more games with the visitor, you know, with the audience, with spectators? And you know, it just didn't care. And of course, none of these things made any sense to take any risks whatsoever. That's where I'm coming from, at least on this. So I feel like, you know, since we were having psychology angles earlier, you know, there was clearly all the Kubler-Ross stages of grief or stages of loss, if you will, going on, of denial and bargaining. that was going on everywhere. That's in some cases cost us, weeks, sometimes multiple or many weeks in response times and whatnot. So this is a good line right here, right? The virus is the biggest bullshit filter ever conceived. Like, it literally just took every bit of social mythologies, and they are important for our everyday functioning, everyday lives, but it just turned them all down. It sliced them all off. And then ever since then, we're of course now in a new environment, in a new situation where we're trying to come to grips with this, what just happened, and trying to sort of rebuild the meanings of these social mythologies. And some of them may not come back to reclaim their former meanings, or at least not to the same degree, or not in the same form. So there's certainly a lot of that going on. I really enjoyed the comments by Göran earlier about, how we do still need to value the analog. The analog may even become even more important now that more people have been pushed digital. So absolutely on board with that. And yeah, it is a communications crisis, because certainly a lot of institutions were caught just as much by this, including these, the social mythologies around them that suddenly got turned down, to then communicate with the same level of, shall we say, authority or impact, at a minimum. So absolutely, it did create a crisis upon a crisis. The communications crisis is very real around this. And if you've been, keeping your ears to the ground on social media, you've seen that, absolutely. And there are foreign or otherwise, there are bad actors absolutely also trying to influence things, and you can't always be 100% sure to what ends. Sometimes it's literally just trolling. Sometimes there are some bigger things going on behind the scenes, and that's not to be underestimated as well. Last but not least, I would just say, and this goes a little bit in line with the idea of earlier of saying, like, okay, have an artist on your social media team, on your marketing team, and so forth. So there's an example of BMW screwing up early on during the pandemic. March 24th is still pretty early on, and having a tweet, an ad, quasi ad, right, put out there that just was so tone deaf to the situation, right? Tone deaf to the sense that, well, right now is not the time to try and sell somebody your car. However cool or whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. Like, this was just plain wrong. And here's a guy that's actually like a car guy, as far as I understand it. I think Alex Roy is sort of like a car enthusiast. And he just said, look, fire your agency immediately. So think about that, right? Like, you can literally screw this stuff up so badly if you don't, read the room or see what's going on out there on any given day or any given week, and the background situation, that you can screw things up very terribly. So get some extra artists and some devil's advocates and whoever else is like tightly tuned into what's truly going on from moment to moment. And there's a lot of value in that, and get that going. Same thing here, right? This is that site that everybody keeps looking at, the worldometers.info, coronavirus counts with the cases and all the, other things. And of course, right now, if you're just putting ads against this, web ads with fashion, it's just wrong. It just rubs people the wrong way. It's sending the wrong message. It's violating archetypal principles without going into deeper, into greater depth on this. But this is the kind of thing that you're really trying to avoid, right? So that's what I'd advise everyone to tread very carefully, or else you will lose some of those famous shitstorms. And here's the little okay boomer. I already had this in here actually before Ulrike even mentioned it earlier. But
absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. So that was it anyway. But yeah, it was that was the basic idea, right? That we got to be very careful. There are people on the older spectrum that know a lot of things, and on the younger spectrum, we do need to communicate respectfully. But it is difficult, and it's certainly been made more difficult by these additional layers in between now, including all our digital tools and social media. All righty.
Thank you so much, Alex. And what I loved especially about your talk is how you already related to the other speakers before and what they were stating. And I saw Ulrike taking many notes. So I think we are absolutely up for a great discussion here about you both actually being so knowledgeable about the topic. And last but not least, before we take a little break, Nadja, we would like to hear from you as well, your thoughts, your opinion on the subject matter.
Thank you very much. The difficulty being the last speaker at the end, of course, is, well, in my case, I always find it difficult to choose whether I want to actually present what I wanted to say or just comment on what has gone before me. There's so many interesting topics that go around. And and on one side, I feel I should have switched with Neil in this case, but I hope that what I'm going to present will actually encompass some of the items that you have been discussing throughout the entire session. So I come from a primarily policy-making background. So despite working on, advocating for systems thinking in communities, I try to bring communities together, focusing on a multi-stakeholder approach to solve problems collectively. So in essence, what Neil was saying, what can we do together? That's what I try to build my life on, bringing in, I'm interested how information travels, how information gets presented, how it is received, and how we can use it to build solutions. So what I wanted to look at when we were looking in times of crisis is at primarily 2 case studies. When COVID just broke out, and I'm literally talking for Western Europe. So hello from Brussels, the heart of the EU. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened to all the people who were stuck abroad and wanting to come back to their home countries. So I wanted to look at Belgium and the Netherlands on how they responded to this. And then later talk a little bit more about how other countries, the communities responded to information that they were getting from their governments. A little bit about fake news and the role of fact checking, which is my kind of area of specialization. So when this entire situation broke out, people were traveling all across the world. People were on an Erasmus in another EU country. They were on a study trip. They were on a study abroad. They just moved. They were visiting family. They are still on Christmas holiday and just weren't able to get back. The Belgian government then decided, well, every government decided, well, all the embassies have to stay open to provide as much help as possible. But what did the Belgian government do specifically in terms of social media? They set up a group, a multilingual group where all the languages, because Belgium has 3 official languages, everybody could just write in their own language and everybody would get a response in their own language. The Belgian government decided to create a community where Belgium was able to provide the information on an official basis. The people who are in those areas, some people are in deserted islands, some people are in the middle of tropical, the Dutch word is oerwoud, forests, tropical forests. Some people were in mountains. They had no idea what was happening in the world. They had no connection to the internet. They would arrive somewhere and nobody would be able to provide them with the support that they needed. But some of them did have access to Facebook. Because this access to Facebook, they were able to connect either with their embassies, with friends or family who were connected on this platform. So in this platform itself, they did not only collect people that were stuck, but also expats who are in that country. So if you were a Belgian in, for example, Sri Lanka, you would also be invited to join this group to be able to provide support, either whether that is a night to stay, provide accommodation, provide transport from A to B, to provide blankets, anything that would be possible to ensure that you had information. Besides information from, well, whether or not you could come back, there's also information, of course, on the embassy on the other side. What is happening in the information locally? Because you don't always speak the language. Not all the information, everybody's in times of crisis. They're trying to get out as much information as possible, but people were not able to gain access simply because of the language barrier. If you only have a certain amount of knowledge of where to find that information, how to access that website, you don't know any locals, you're in a hard place. Having this space there was a really great opportunity for them to then connect not only with the embassy, but with the community itself. The embassy then provided many transport options to then go back. But even so, still there are people stuck in remote areas all across the world without being able to come back. And their only means of getting access back to any form of communications that they might not be able to receive in their cities locally is through being engaged on social media and trying to connect with people in their surroundings. In the Netherlands was a little bit more, it was a little differently. The Netherlands did not, the people in the Netherlands did not wait for government to take charge. The Netherlands has a very large travel community, and they invited everybody in these travel communities to collect all on this Facebook group, which is an existing Facebook group of sharing your best holiday experiences. They collected everybody who was stuck to invite them to this holiday group and to tell them what they needed. And there was a dedicated group of people who decided to find flight and buy up all these flights for all these Dutch people, regardless of cost, regardless of if you know that person or not. Based on pure faith, people decided to buy flight tickets to ensure that people could come home. They would rent buses together, they would plan these, and they used this across platforms. So even managing across platforms was done from a bottom-up approach. People would then were able to find each other in that way. All the roads actually led to this one Facebook group, and having access to that was immense. But for those people who do not know that these communities exist, for those people who do not know that there are more options beside your embassy, those are the people, or even if you have no access to, there's a really funny story that I love, was that there was a couple who is on a boat and they are sailing across the world, and they had no idea for 72 days that COVID happened. So when they arrived at their first stop, they weren't allowed in. It was only because they were allowed to step near enough land that they could get Facebook that they were able to find out what to do and how to move forward. This is the case that people really realize how important it is to have primarily access to the internet, to be able to have communications. And then when you have communications, the manner in which we are engaging with each other to find solutions to the problems that we have. If I recall correctly, according to Statistica, only 59% of the world is connected online. So when in times of crisis, how do you find out information? It becomes very, very difficult if only 59% of us is connected. The rest of us find out through other means, whether that's broadcasting, so you're reliant on one source specifically, or through friends and family, especially if you're in such a circumstance that you actually don't have direct access, but you're also limited to language barriers or skill barriers. So if you're too young or too old to be able to cope with the materials that you have. So in intercommunications, I always feel that cross-platform communications is then extremely important, although very difficult. What was a very different experience from these communities coming together was colleagues in the Maldives and Nepal. Colleagues in Maldives and Nepal really faced information that was coming from all different sides. Nobody knew who to trust or what to trust anymore. They couldn't even trust their own friends. Everybody seemed to have good intentions. And that in itself can be a problem. Not everything is done with bad intentions. Not everything is necessarily done in terms of profit. The issue that people then faced was, how do you know? How can you know for sure that I'm doing the best thing for me and my family? And that creates fear, and that fear creates miscommunication. So when we talk about fake news, I prefer the term the information disorder. Fake news encompasses so many things and can even be used as a tool to like really insult other people or to negate their discussion simply because you don't like what they're saying. Trump very much likes to call everything that doesn't agree with his policy fake news. That makes everything very difficult to discuss. So when I like to talk about the information disorder, I specifically like to comment on disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. So people are most familiar with the concept of disinformation. information that is false and deliberately put out there to hurt someone or to hurt a group or an organization or a country, but it is false and it is there to hurt. When you're looking at misinformation, that's information that's false, but it's not necessarily created with the intention to harm someone. It's just your interpretation of something or your misunderstanding of something, but you still put it out there and you present it as fact simply because, you know, you have that information stuck with you. But it's misinformation because it's false. But you also have malinformation. Malinformation is based on reality, something that actually is happening, but simply you only know a part of the story or a little bit, and that can create harm. That can inflict a possible, you know, difficulty to an organization or a country or a person. So I like to distinguish between these three, because when we have communication with each other, when we find and receive information, it is easy to say, I'm going to fact check and I'm going to source verify something. And that's something that I always, you know, encourage. And when I go on these platforms, when I go on Facebook groups and I see people fact checking and source verifying each other, it's great to let people know, I got this information and this is the source where it came from. So next time that you're looking for this type of information, you can go back there. To do that is a great experience, but also our response to it. So when Ulrike was also commenting about, are you communicating or are you already hating, and mentioning about the manner in which we are expressing ourselves, we also need to be thinking about how are we receiving it and how do we think about these things. So when people provide information, are they actively trying to harm you? Or did they hurt something and it was wrong? And how do we react to it? Perhaps they only knew a little bit, but it was out of context, and so it's not applicable here. And that's what we find with COVID. Some people use rules from one country that's not applicable to another country, and you get super mad. That's not true. That's not fair. That's not, etc., without realizing the consequences. Oh, hey, have you asked what country are you in? Because if I knew that you're from this country, that's not applicable to another country. A lot of people ask me, for example, how did I survive lockdown? I did not have to go in lockdown. At no point in time did I have to go in lockdown. I'm in quarantine now because I chose to be in quarantine. But I've never had curfew. I didn't have fines. I haven't experienced it myself. So that miscommunication of experiences, that miscommunication of that understanding also needs to be part of the communications that we're having. That being said, if we're going to look at the role of fact-checking and source verification, we need to look at the role of science. We mentioned earlier before in several of the presentations how information is being presented. And of course, different people have different manners of looking at the sciences. The Netherlands says we shouldn't use face masks. They're not relevant anyway, because it only marks a certain percentage of it. And the biggest problem is that people don't know how to wear the masks. So then instead of creating this false delusion, we might as well not wear them and make sure that people keep the 1.5 meters distance, because that then becomes more important than wearing the mask and then still hugging each other and then wearing your mask underneath your nose. The manner in which you then use information and being informed about this information then comes at particular prices. And then who gets to decide to make these choices? That ultimately then comes to the individual, even though we like to think that it's a political responsibility, whether or not we choose to be part of this community and choose to be part of this setting. And I'm not saying this in terms of advocating for a particular right or wrong answer. I'm particularly advocating of making sure that we are an informed society. To me, it is important that we get the right information, that we understand and take the time to have this information settled within us, and then making an informed decision. So if you are deciding to go and do something, that you've done that with all the information that is available and accessible. And that's why access is so incredibly important, and information and the manner in which we communicate this information is so incredibly important. So I look very much to the discussion we're having. I also have my many notes of all the interesting things that I want to look up from everything that you've all said. about how our future can look like in terms of social media crises and the people that we're working with and living with and try to communicate with. So I'm very happy to leave it here, and if you have any questions, then let me know.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nadja. A very interesting talk as well, also on the different types of information we can have: misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. Kristin, I don't know what we were having in the beginning of this session. I think it was a kind of mal and misinformation mixed up, but I think now it's time to also include Gitta into the conversation, although she cannot personally be here. But as you said, she left you with a statement, and that might be a nice finisher before we go to the break.
Yes, thank you, Rebekka. And I want to share it now. I have a technical problem with the picture. Gitta sent me. Just a moment, please. So that's not the right one. This one. And then the screen share. So I hope you can see Gitta now.
Not yet. Now we can see her.
Okay, great. So you all know Gitta as the founder of FORMWELT Institute, and Gitta wrote a text. We all know Gitta as being phenomenal on social media, and almost every day she writes an article about 3, 4, 5 big slides, and I don't know anybody else who's able to do this every day. So when she recognized that she won't do it in this session, she said, okay, I have to leave the previous panel for a few minutes. And then she gave me another text to give you as an inspiration for this panel. And I try to read it as good as I can and start it now. Okay, maybe I go to the full presentation. So, no, that doesn't work. I start to read like this. So first of all, to all participants and viewers, I'm very sorry that I have to cancel at such short notice due to illness. An allergy seems to have really gotten me. I would like to share my thoughts via Kristin with you briefly and hope they have some inspiring effects. From my perspective, social media competence begins with the individual's ability to become aware of his or her own thoughts. Once you start to learn to reflect on your concepts, you not only immediately take speed out of the action, but you also take the time to review the concepts of others, as well as your own for the following aspects. Are the concepts compatible with each other? Are they coherent with each other? Do they have empirical value? Social media competence means individual competence. It means being aware of the fact that we cannot escape complexity and therefore can only do our best to use the tools and methods we have developed so far to distinguish bullshit from facts and rational argumentation from heuristic rhetoric. Many say that rationality is overrated. They do so at the computer, which was developed with rational mind, and they overlook the fact that rational thinking is an evolutionary achievement that helps us to test our intuition. Conceptual competence means self-competence. Conceptual competence means knowing when you do not knowing something and when you know something. Today's platforms, such as Facebook, rely on us not to expand our conceptual competence, to renounce logic, rational argumentation, our innate ability to take a step back and judge what is happening from a greater distance. Empathy and our longing for a good future for all ask us to learn the following: to consciously reflect and to communicate in an operative and centrally perceptible way. Conceptual clarity enables us to say what we mean, to learn the density of meaning and textual sharpness that we need to communicate what is important to us on the one hand, and to listen better to what we have to say on the other, because we have listened to ourselves. The higher the selectivity with which we listen and read, the more we become dependent on our own triggers, which force us to react only to ourselves over and over again. Many social media concepts rely on us to refrain from doing so, with the results that we put our energy into unnecessary arguments instead of devoting ourselves to the important problems of our time. Thank you. And thank you, Gitta, for these dense words, deep words at the end of the first half.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kristin. And we would now all give ourselves a 5-minute comfort break to refresh, get something to drink. And we would like to see you again here, welcome you again in 5 minutes. Also a good opportunity to maybe digest a bit what you heard so far and get ready for the open discussion round, which we are looking forward to. So see you in 5 minutes. And here we are returning from the break for the second part of our evening session today, Social Media Competence and Communication in Times of Crisis. We have had already so many inspiring statements and also a wonderful keynote by Ulrike. So now it's time to have an open conversation and discussion amongst all of us. We trust you will self-organize a little bit, make sure that also the other participants get room and time to speak. This might be easiest in this setting by raising your hand if you would like to say something and communicate exactly. And we will steer the conversation a bit when we see someone is not getting their space. But we trust you are absolutely able to handle this. So with that, Kristin, we are opening the stage and Ulrike is already raising her hand, so I guess she would like to go first. What has been on your mind during the break, Ulrike? You have to unmute. We can't hear you.
You have to unmute. It's
yeah, I know. Yeah. But I didn't do it myself. So I was thinking all the time already. There were very interesting points. Interesting was for me the one point. I'm just saying, just like Gitta did it yesterday, also a few times. I'm just putting a few hashtags into the space so that we have something to discuss upon. I had this social distancing in the crisis that we are learning to cope without looking each other in the eyes, Göran said, and Alex also said there are different attitudes in social distancing now, and if maybe it is also something we have to learn to practice in future. The other thing is then, which is maybe getting grounded now through this big crisis, this big global crisis in Corona times, new social culture. Is this something we have to cope with? And then also from Göran, I liked it from the partner matching, that there is, as I call it, the Tinder behavior, that we also see now that the mechanism we have in the apps, we also find it in social media channels like Insta stories and so on. We can swipe things away and all that is already matching each other. If we like it or not. And I was also thinking in that moment when he said we are swiping more quicker, I was also thinking of my students again and the way they changed over the years. I said 15 years or a little bit more, I had been watching them, and from year to year the copies got shorter. So that is to kneel, because the poems and the long copy is it's the end of this period. Actually, we are talking about the quick snack content, and that is also the quick time the people don't concentrate anymore. They aren't capable of concentrating longer anymore, so they swipe on. Göran, as a scanner personality, I would also say I'm a scanner personality. I'm so interested in everything, but now it is really like this, that the brain is changing from the young people. And the next thing was the hashtag non-verbal communication, and then of course the non-verbal misunderstanding, because we are talking in pictures and we aren't anymore in words. We are often only in pics. We were thinking about Greta sitting in the German Bahn, and everybody was discussing about the terrible situation the German Bahn is in, and the poor girl is sitting on the floor. And in the end, it came out that she was sitting there voluntarily because she wanted to sit there, whatever. But the discussion on social media was, oh God, what is happening there? So it's also, we have to practice, and now I'm coming to Nadja. Nadja, we have to practice interculturally and intergenerationally, to take my wonderful theme. I love my theme. And because this is not practice, and we have to learn to understand each other. And if we are now global all the time, always on global, then we have to learn to avoid misunderstandings. And then I was saying the last point, end and start of opinion dictating over politic and state. Everybody, the individual is taking over. That's what I was, I thought it was so wonderful what all of you were saying, and I'd love to hear what you say to that.
So first Göran raised his hand and then Neil. Okay. Göran, you have to unmute.
Do that as well, right? Okay,
Yes,
I'm back. So because like meanwhile you were talking, I made some notes on my notepad here. Due to the focus on online dating, it got clear to me due to like several researches I investigated in. It's proven that we commoditize each other because we become items when we are appearing on a screen. So, and this is a thing which probably, it's just a hypothesis, cuts us off the ancient modalities we have in communication. So it becomes more and more mental as we are just on screens and on an oral plane. But we already know that as beings, as we generate a certain kind of energy, radiance, charisma, whatsoever, that is not fully conveyed in a digital way. So this I just wanted to add up on. And when it comes to having conversations these days, and this is what I hear so often, is I think due to what we call like the economy of attention we deteriorate the ability to really listen. And especially like in the COVID crisis, especially in the maybe like first third or first half, where people just got crazy in social media, I would love to flip your saying, Ulrike, that we don't have to avoid misunderstandings. The first thing is that we have to detect them. Because if we are in this economy of attention where everybody just screams me, or my opinion here and there, I think we totally lack the ability to be tolerant. And by the thing we said before, online, because now we are mixing, we have just like this little context of conversation and maybe like in this boxy thing wheresoever, or even in a chat, but we do not have the time to get to know the other one, to feel the radiance, to get to know about the social economic background of a person. So that's why I put in the chat contextualization versus localization, because it might be much easier for me to get a certain understanding of a person's perspective if I allow myself to know more about his perspective. And this is an observation I got in private chats, but especially like in my work realm, that the ability to swap perspectives is totally like de-developing. And it's the cheapest way of personal development to just step in some other person's shoes. And this is something I think should be trained or should become a habit or somehow ritualized, to go first to what does that mean to you? How did you understand that? Why did you mention that? And not what you mentioned is wrong to me, so it's wrong generally. This is what I mean. Like, I think we have like a big issue of really detecting the misunderstandings, and we have a even bigger issue, even if we have detected them, to just accept them and to open like even a blurry space of, okay, you are okay, I am okay, and maybe your opinion, which totally differs from mine, might enrich my little universe.
Thank you very much, Göran. And you said something what is really the mission of Gitter and FORMWELT, and to put the misunderstandings away. Thanks. Not put it away, but take care about that we can understand properly.
There, when we talk about like this thing, because Gitter so often is speaking about concept clarity. So, but how can we ensure that my concept is kind of like congruent with yours when I come just from a different neighborhood, from a different psychological background? I can say the Germans, for instance, but we have to take in consideration that probably like the generation of my parents that are now like in the mid or end of the 60s, because they come from the East, when we talk about some like work or politic related topics, we have to take in consideration that most of the people in the East face some kind of humiliation that came like unconsciously with the system change of 30 years ago. Yeah. So when we talk about that, we have to take it in consideration, and we cannot expect people to have that on their reflectional plane once they are talking. So
that's right. So Neil, you raised your hand next.
Some rich content. Thanks for all the other speakers. Interesting, Göran, and I disagree with Ulrike and Göran, because I think the point of if it's wrong to me, it's wrong to everyone has actually just been applied by both of you. If we recognize ourselves as individual people still being developed, and if I'm humble enough in myself to know that I'm not fully complete yet, and if I don't fully understand myself in the context that Gita might say to consciously reflect on myself, then I can give permission to all others to still be in a stage of development, change, and recognition. Some of the most conscious individuals that I know are 22 and 24, and they are having long discourses around ethics, around how we move forward in the context of real crises. And I hope that Mitch and Tarek are both watching this. They're reading amazing books like The Listening Society, right? We're looking at In Over Our Heads, right, by Keegan and others. So to me, this is not just about assuming that we're all the same and therefore using the platform the same way. The platform is neutral. The majority of use, I would agree with you, is blind to some of these differences. The critical capability and maturity comes through the application of, and there's a noble obligation, a noblesse oblige for those of us that can hold space for the greater diversity that's already present and the undifferentiated audience which is already in the room. The reason I'm in Belgium is that I was seen from Australia when I was failing to make a difference in the real world there, from Belgium on social media. The reason I'm being invited into commons circles and alternative circles is there's multiple opportunities to access and curate very deep sources of information. The challenge is how do we integrate those in ways that allows multiple individuals to make sense of them. And it needs synthesizers and integrators that can hold space for that diversity to then tailor the messages. So it's more like cosmo-localization, which is the peer-to-peer approach of Michelle Bowens, to actually say, how do we recognize that these are both personal and universal challenges? And the thing about crises is that they create the recognition, the mutual recognition of universal harms. And in the face of universal harms, we have to try and work out how to act in universal interests. Nadja's examples were beautiful about how different cultures found similar ways to self-organize to get better outcomes for their people through the recognition of harm and that others that they empathized with were in harm. And so the social media has the rich potential to go deep, it has the shallow potential to go broad, and it has the opportunity with people like us to vertically integrate between those that can only see it in a shallow sense and those that can see the much deeper potentials. And that's why I think Gita's point about don't throw away the rationality, recognize the empathy, consciously reflect and listen to ourselves as we each develop in the context of others, which is walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, because deeper engagement is possible and deeper engagement is absolutely necessary. And I picked up also on what Alex and Göran were saying, you know, where is the deeper engagement and the deeper dialogue? Well, there's groups like Collective Presencing, Collective Alchemy, Deep Adaptation, which are having these deep, mindful conversations online through Zoom and then capturing that in documentation. And so it is there, but the energy goes where the attention is, and the attention goes where the energy is, and your attention goes according to the lenses you're wearing, and that comes back to your worldviews and your levels of consciousness. And if we can get that to start to operate, then this group has a chance to make a big difference, because we are in the middle of social ecological collapse. Thank you.
I'd love to jump in there if I may. The last thing that Neil said just there is quite striking, because that's something that I usually only discuss in like a course context for like advanced studies of the archetypal contents and contexts and so forth, because that's, you know, the old saying is, I think that's sort of from I don't know, 60s or 70s psychology backgrounds or something, like energy goes where attention flows, right? And the reverse, as you then yourself just said it, you know, is also true. That part is true, but it is also like where energy flows, attention goes, and that's why we actually call the archetypes and the archetypal contents, and you know, however you yourself like to conceptualize that is fine. You know, I have my own system, but that doesn't mean that anybody else needs to, you know, use only that system. You know, whether you look at it as instincts or principles, prime directives, ethics on down, and so forth. But the idea that there is energy in these things, and then attention gets drawn in to that energy. And certainly social media is absolutely, you know, a mass phenomenon and a mass experiment. I mean, really probably at a scale that we've never seen before in human history, actually, on how this can operate, you know. And I gave the example of Instagram, which, you know, isn't even the hottest, newest new thing anymore for the last few years with TikTok and some of the drama now that's going on around that. But it's still quite powerful, and it absolutely had that effect, right? That I tried to point out, that it is a self-identification machine that, you know, tags you by your interests. It tags you by the images that speak to you. So there was energy there, and you honed in on it. And then, you know, if it's really the kind of thing that not only do you recognize, but then it really does resonate with you, you know, people will look at it again and again and again, and they become part of the communities and so forth. So yeah, go ahead.
Just a very quick comeback, if I could, on that. Resonance is critical. Otto Scharmer in Theory U talks about trying to play the macro violin. And I can link this then to Every Act is Sacred. When he went into Chartres Cathedral and tried to play his violin with the acoustic, he said, the cathedral nearly spat me out. Right? Yeah. A group and a community will do that too if the immune system rises. Yeah. You don't listen to the violin, you listen to the acoustic from the room. And a good operator can listen to the room, whether that's a Facebook room, whether that's a Zoom conversation. I agree with you, we need the personal connection, but I can see the body language of all of you right now, right? I can see Göran going, oh God, here he goes again. No, I'm kidding. But the point is that it's critical to be tuning into that, because that is your presence. You are pre-sensing what's going to come. If you're not prejudging, but you're open to multiple possibilities, then you can play different cards. I noticed when you showed your slides, you didn't show them as a presentation. You went and picked them. So you're sensing into what needs to come next. Each one of those cards, when put on the table in front of a group, a Facebook group or whatever, will get a response or no response. And if it's the wrong card, you can say, oh, sorry, wrong card. Provided you are actually tuned into the space. If you're not tuned in, you're going to get spat out. And so I think we can create the conditions to facilitate emergence.
Responsibility.
Yes.
Responsibility. And the other thing that I meant to say, also picking up on both yours and Göran's items, was about the walking a mile in others' shoes. And this goes right back to what you were just saying too, that and he was saying tolerance of others' opinion. So one of the things that I've kind of become a fan of and like to bring up as often as I can is Miller's Law, as it's called. That's the guy, I believe it's John Miller. He also did invent that concept of the 7 plus or minus 2 memory slots that we each may or may not have. It's actually held up relatively well, interestingly enough, with so much else being kind of thrown by the wayside in psychology in recent years with the replication crisis. But so Miller's law just says, to understand what another person is saying, you must assume that it is true and must try to imagine what it could be true of. So basically it's saying it's true for them. They somehow came up with this. There must be a kernel of truth at an absolute minimum in there somewhere that got them to believe this, unless it's just absolute pure trolling, let's say, which we do get on the internet quite a bit on social media. That's a whole different phenomenon, probably not necessary to go in great depth on that tonight. But so that one can really get you a long way, I believe. Imagine what it could be true of. You know, so I like to preface a lot of my courses with this too, where I say, you know, it's like, hey, this archetype stuff that I've thought a lot about, I've read a ton of books about, is new to you, and some of it maybe, you know, you may have allergic or otherwise reactions to what I'm saying, and just for a moment, you know, drop the judgment. Imagine and involve yourself in it first, and then later come back around and then integrate it and then judge it, and then you can still tell me I'm full of it or whatever. That's like I think another good principle to apply is have a null hypothesis for almost anything you do, including kind of like your life's, you know, key works or hobbies, that kind of thing, right? Your most favorite concepts. Just say like, okay, null hypothesis. There are no archetypes, or it's all just memes and memetics, let's say, for example, and Alex should just shut the hell up. You know, that's my null hypothesis. So that's the fair and open approach that science takes towards things that it studies when it's done right. And there are scientists that aren't letting their egos get in the way of things too, and are not beyond, you know, being sucked into getting too full of themselves. So that's not uncommon either. Anyway, so those are a few of those items that I kind of kept tingling and coming up for me as you were talking about your whole stuff.
Thank you very much, Alex. Yeah. So I saw another two hands. First Ulrike and then Nadja, right?
I give my voice to Nadja because she hasn't had a share of voice yet.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things. The first one being is when we're talking about energies and where all these things are coming together and stepping in each other's shoes, the concept of truth. So this has been a very big concept that's been spoken about in particularly journalism, about where is truth nowadays and what is the meaning of truth in our society. For some people, truth means something that's verifiable and fact-checking. So for example, for a factor as I am, I'm very happy if people perceive truth as something that is verifiable. And when you look at media in Northern Europe, primarily, when you look at most of the news or how they present their information sources, it's verifiable. But then if you look on the other side, in some societies, the concept of truth is truth based on you have a particular leader and you trust that this leader is going to present you with the information that allows you to survive. So for example, if you think of the Ruski Mir, the concept of this is that you have a leader. The Mir is usually like a community in Russia. Your Mir, you choose a leader and you trust that the leader is gathering the knowledge to make an informed decision for you to survive the Siberian winter. In that regard, whether or not they know whether the information they presented is true or false, it's with all the information that they were capable of gathering, they were making informed choices. And that is allowing them to survive the next part. So then when we're talking about a communications crisis and where information, the energies are going, we have the individual that is trying to verify, trying to navigate this information pollution where there's so much information out there. And you have people who are trying to gather all the informed information and trying to make these decisions of this is the information that you should be knowing. And then it's up to us to identify where are these people and who are these people. And then that in itself is also where you then look towards your leaders of your own communities, the people that you trust and understand. And when I look back at the Maldives, at some point, they couldn't trust anyone, not even their own friends, not even their own family. So then where do you turn to? So when you then go into, I liked Miller's Law, and I generally build any discussion based on Miller's Law also on intellectual pluralism, that you present your argument and you keep presenting an argument and you keep going until you meet someone who can show you and who makes you understand that the narrative or the manner of your thinking is not conform with the manner in which our society is functioning now, because a truth in one society can be a different truth in another, or time can be the difference. For example, homosexuality in our time versus homosexuality 50 years ago, then the time has changed the meaning. So what we perceive as truth then changes. So this is my question is, I think words are powerful, and saying that we're in a communications crisis is I think harmful to all of us. I like to call it myself navigating the changing media landscape, because if you mentioned, for example, that we now have a lot of short information headlines. We are not reading long information anymore. But if I think about the radio, when I still listen to it, it's short snippets. If I look at TV, it's only the news is only 10 minutes long, maybe half an hour if you were watching in its entirety. We're still, what we previously relied on hasn't been that much either. And where we're looking at, for example, broadsheets, this was primarily accessible to the educational elites and those who have access to the educational elites. And so I do agree that I think now that we have more access to different varieties, and therefore I think we are navigating the changing media landscape, but that we also need to allow ourselves some faith and some trust that we need to find different methods of navigating it, rather than punishing ourselves for not being capable of managing it.
Yeah. Well, that's also a good point. I just wanted to say to Neil, you're not in a different position, actually. I think it's just the place you're talking about, different places than I'm talking about. If you are someone like me, heavy user, 10 hours or whatever of social media and working with social media, then it's as Göran said, it's the scanner personalities you have to be working with. And I'm not thinking about Zoom conferences, or if we are, for instance, a new tool, which is very fashionable, at least in Germany, and I think also in lots of Western countries, is the podcast. There's so much success for 3 or 4 hour long interviewings, and brands are switching over and making advertising on podcasts because they love that special interest, all these special groups. We have, for instance, 11 Friends, that is a football podcast, and they are only the people talking about football all the day, just like they used to in the restaurant or in a pub. And there, of course, if you have your special interest, the people read long books and they are talking to each other and they are discussing. And of course, if you are in your master study lessons, dear Alex, then of course you can talk there all the time. You can talk 4 hours and the people will be sitting there and listening to you. But if you are on social media, as for instance, your daily business on Facebook, or daily, even much more, of course, Twitter, then you will see how much the attention flows, and there you see the hashtags of the day, and there the attention is in terrible places. Yesterday, I think there was so many terrible hashtags that I was thinking, oh God, what is happening here? There was nothing sensible anymore left over. They were all trash hashtags, and you can see that time is a main issue of our society, and the younger the people get, the shorter the attention is. That's why, of course, we have to find new places to discuss, and of course, we want to higher the level, as Gitta said yesterday. We want to raise the level of education. We want to give more people, Nadja, than 59% haven't gotten access to social media, but we want to get access to anything They should get access to free education and whatever we are working on. But in the moment, we have to think about the point. What are we going to do with these people we are leaving behind? The people who don't have access to digital apparatus, and the group that's maybe also the elderly. We found out in the crisis they didn't have any communication tools. They were cut off in their hospitals and in their Pflegeheime, in their caring houses, and nobody was allowed to see them. Even they died there alone because they weren't allowed to be visited. And on the other place, the young people, they have access to so many things at the same time. They are playing games. At the same time, they are studying for their diploma. And at the same time, they are on 3 channels. They have 3 channels open. And the TV sets and all these modern things are now working already with screens where you have all that stuff on it. And when you are playing, you can already order yourself the Nike shoes and the hoodies which the star is wearing or whatever. And that is what we have to work with, because that is the general part and the big part of the society, and not those people who are interested in a doctor or master study. That is a wonderful group of people. I love discussing with them, but they aren't the general society. I think so, at least. That's what I'm seeing, what I'm a prognostic. I'm not working as you in those areas, but what I see in my 30 years of advertising and marketing and working on all those channels, I can tell you it's not getting better. Göran.
Can you hear me? Yeah. That just comes to my mind. That I think like a big potential in social media, if we really like have the assumption of opening ourselves up to what it can mean like to be human, is that we really take the chance to invite people that are not part of the majority of the people that were driving social media in the first place. And I say that because I lately read a book by a National Geographic anthropologist named Wade Davis. The book is called The Wayfinders, and I can just like cordially recommend to read that book, because this man in his almost like 70 years of life lived with many First Nation communities all over the planet. And it was a great eye-opener to me to totally like rethink my whole perspective on life itself. And on the planet itself, on communication, what it means to be in a community, what leadership means, what the relationship to my environment means. And interestingly, some tribes already adapt to social media. For instance, the Yawanawa from Brazil, they start sharing their stories, and their stories is like the highest treasure they have, because their stories, the narratives, they contain the law, the relations, their wisdom, and so forth. And I think it's really important to find ways to make it really like an open space, really like a platform to let everyone reign in almost like a comparable same amount. So that's, I think, like that's the beauty and the big potential. So of course I'm not. How do you say? There might be an English word for Maschinenstürmer, right? It's a very nice German word to express the avoidance of new technology. So it's just part of our evolution. Pardon?
Luddites. The Luddites were the ones that.
Yeah, like the Luddites, right.
Yeah. Spinnen machine.
Technophobia, perhaps.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's super interesting for me that even like because we were like talking about the notion, and you were that, Neil. We are on one planet, and I think like COVID was the first phenomenon that showed us, oh, there's some global thing affecting, or that seems to affect us really at the same time mutually, and having, or like how can I say, like making us like able to adapt to this firsthand experience, to also tackle other problems that are connected to this kind of connectedness. So, and I think like the term connectedness should be way beyond the electronic quality of social media and the internet itself. So to really realize we are one planet. I don't know, because I'm a big fan of memes, and I've seen, like, maybe you have seen this meme. There's like two people in an argument, and then you see the context of a group, then you see the context of a country, and at the end you see the planet very far away in the universe. And then what does that count? Was like the last tagline underneath that. And I really, that's my big hope, and I'm really like happy. I don't know where you all are sitting, because we are now united with kind of a common notion of things, or like an ambition, to make this this connectedness really, to give them the chance to unfold and to get out of this crisis we are facing at the moment.
Thank you, Göran. So Neil raised his hand, and then Alex. And to avoid misunderstandings between us, Neil, if we do like this, is this a raising hand as well?
Oh, no. That's actually, I'm in full accordance and I love it.
Great. That's
it's-
how I
I-
understood, but I want to get sure.
I don't know any sign language, but I'm learning.
So it's up to you.
A couple of things. First of all, Ulrike, I can guarantee you I saw none of the hashtags that occupied you for 10 hours yesterday. So the energy goes where the attention is, and if your attention is there, then that's what you'll see. Secondly, I would assume that if we drew a bell curve distribution of the people using social media, taking out the 43% or whatever it was that don't have access to the internet, that there'll be a very few number who are using it for very high level purposes around ethical discussions about how are we going to potentially subvert the extinction of humanity, right? And then there'll be people at various levels, right back to the majority of that bell curve being the main herd of wildebeest, sitting there, nose down, bum up, chewing away at grass until there's no grass left, right? When they finally stick their heads up, they're going to say, where's the bloody leadership around here, right? And then they're going to want somebody who has seen these things coming for longer, who can see further ahead, who actually knows how to use the technology, who knows that last time it rained over there, 2 weeks later there was grass, who knows there's crocodiles between us and them, and if I go now, I'm going to get eaten by the lions. So when you guys get your act together, let's go. But some of us have been thinking about this for a while. So to me, the hashtag is the herd, right? There's a herd mentality here, not a herd immunity, it's a herd mentality, right? But the herd immunity comes from those who take the risks, find out new ways, actually bring back more innovative approaches to actually say, where might we go together that isn't here now? So I recognize that there's a significant number of people that aren't going very far, very fast, and are using these things with very quick swipes and so on. I also recognize that my own kids can multitask and do things in multiple directions simultaneously and somehow still have sufficient attention. Right? I also recognize that they're not the ones doing the deep ethical thinking like my other 23-year-old friends. And I also recognize that there's a bunch of wisdom sitting in the room in other places. Part of my role is, as you said, I think your term was intergenerational ambassador, to actually hold space for the potentials of multiple ages, groups, disciplines, transdisciplinary, different faiths, recognizing that each of them has a valid perspective, but their valid perspective might not actually be of any value to humanity's survival in a crisis. And so how do we hold space for them to be at the level of understanding they're at and gently disrupt them to a new level of understanding? And I think it was Alex was talking, or might have been Göran was talking about, no, it was Alex talking about the trickster and the example of, oh dear, I've forgotten her name. Wonderful little Swedish girl. I should never forget.
Oh, Greta.
Greta. I was thinking Gita was going, Gita. No, it's not. You used Greta as a trickster, but I would regard myself as a trickster. The court jester's role was to speak truth to the court in front of the king at risk of his own head.
Right.
The king's role was to choose whether to believe that and to show his wisdom by accepting the deeper double entendre or triple entendre value of what the jester had put there. And the jester
rode expression of the archetype. Exactly.
Yeah, the jester rode that tight line between potential death by stoning or execution by having his head cut off, or actually shifting the whole nature of the discussion to a different level of understanding. And as I said earlier, those of us that have this capacity to hold space for multiple perspectives and still hold people true to system ethical requirements, not just wants, requirements. If we don't get our act together, we are all dead. Right? And so we have to work out, how do we do this? And if you're not ready to move yet, then at least respect those that are trying to find alternative directions and how we do it. That's not a criticism of you guys. I'm saying from any herd perspective, and my job, whether I like it or not, is to put myself in uncomfortable situations, because I can't be a change agent if I just hang within my bubble. So I inhabit multiple bubbles. I see connections, some of them are even real, and I see patterns, some of them are even real, and I actually explore those by throwing pebbles in the pond and seeing what comes back. And then I learn how to play the macro violin. And when others see me do that, they go, wow, we need that guy because he can do that. And then I can come in and help them. But generally it's at the outsider, as the outsider, bringing a more helicopter perspective rather than the insider with only the depth of knowledge to fight. It's actually the breadth of knowledge to see the weaving. And there's some critical roles here. Yeah,
that,
sorry, I was finishing. Thanks, Ulrike.
Yeah, the perspective is right, but I was talking about the power of the automation. And if we were hearing today artificial intelligence and narratives, then we will see that even if there are these people going into the deep dive, then the automation from Facebook and from Twitter and so on will, and also LinkedIn now, for instance, they are also already starting to change the algorithm again. And so even if you're right, and I'm giving you right, I'm not of a different opinion, but you can't change the world. And if these mighty publishing houses like Google, YouTube, they belong together, and Facebook and Insta, they belong together, and Twitter and so on, they are the tools which will be dictating where the attention goes. You know, that's the point. It's not my private point of view. It's the way the algorithm is going, and there we should be very, very alert and very attentive to change it positively, of course. No? Yeah.
So those worries are, by the way, quite well founded, especially on as far as YouTube is, for example, concerned. There's the guy that wrote the early-ish AI machine learning for YouTube to, you know, basically reinforce what people were already wanting to see, and then showing them more of it, and then getting them deeper and deeper down certain rabbit holes, including potential very destabilizing things and things that you know, led to extreme views and whatnot, right? Like some conspiracy theories and so forth. That is absolutely a thing that has happened, and these companies have only in the last, let's say, 2-3 years, kind of since the U.S. election 2016 into 2017, when this became more clear, have since then really tried to say, okay, well, what can we do about this? How do we countersteer? And then, of course, it becomes very political, because whichever side some of these effects is maybe beneficial to, will then say, well, you can't, you know, now if you're going to mess with this and you're going to like lower our volume in these discussions and in these conflicts and whatever you want to call it, culture wars, then you're wrong. You're silencing us, and you're silencing our rights to free speech. Blah 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 blah. So, you know, on and on it goes. But yeah, those are absolutely things that are important. Just a few add-ons I wanted to bring. So, since we already just now got there to the biggest macro view of, let's say, a Google and Facebook and so forth, right? Then and since we've repeatedly now said, you know, on social media, Göran said, you know, we're the fuel, we're the product in many ways, and not just the users. Or are we even the users at all? You know, and to be honest, I mean, everything about this has been more or less predicted by Marshall McLuhan. So if anybody hasn't read Understanding Media, I can just most recommend it, and I would recommend any young person read it, especially like anybody from, let's say, 15, 16 year on up should probably try to read at least excerpts. And the idea that the medium is the message. So all the things, everything that gets said, whether it's information that's correct, whether it's incorrect, whether it's misinformation, malinformation, all this stuff, none of it really matters as long as the medium gets used. And the medium, as we know it, is getting used. So that's the message that is ultimately there. It's changed our world already. It's changed our societies. It's changed our outlooks. Ulrike is concerned with how it's changed the younger generations and is still changing them even as we speak. So that's certainly going on. So it's always worth going back to good old McLuhan. He did see a lot of this in a time where there was no even, it was like electric media that he was talking about, not even electronic digital media yet. So that's one. And then the other, since Nadja had brought up these examples, these great examples of how people were stranded, in faraway places and were using social media and how to figure out how to get back and yada yada. A really good tweet I once saw some years ago basically said something like, a passport is a slice of tree carried by a hairless ape in order to avoid kidnapping by other hairless apes at certain imaginary lines on a flying space rock. So if you digest that for a second, that's basically the level of simulations and simulacra and social mythologies and social firmware and operating systems and whatnot that are basically overlaid on pure naked reality, and we are all dealing with this. Certainly the coronavirus situation has brought us a lot closer back to some of these most baseline realities, and so that's been eye-opening, I think, for everyone, even people that, let's say, like myself or like yourselves, that deal with some of these deeper layers even for their jobs, and still it's been a wake up call in many ways. So that's interesting and a nice aside. And then let's see, was there one other? Oh yeah, and since Ulrike brought up the Greta brouhaha with the Deutsche Bahn, with the German, right? And it's quite interesting because I have analyzed not only this whole trip that she took with the sailboat to the US, other side of the pond to the UN and then back and all this stuff. And this was actually at the very end of all that. And in some ways, that whole trip was a little bit dissonant with some of the archetypal themes that I believe she is strongest on and had such a extremely powerful impact through. And it's sort of, because then people are like, well, but isn't the yacht kind of like a bourgeois or, very upper middle class item, regardless of what your good intentions are about this, yada, yada, yada. And then the UN thing itself, there was some, okay, well, good that a message was brought there, but then there was some, little, shall we say, problems around the edges even there with this. And of course, and she's getting a lot of counter, flack. She's getting a lot of flack now from all sides because of the elevated position that suddenly arose. And then on the way back came this, and it was, of course, a hugely missed opportunity by the Deutsche Bahn ultimately as a social media team, the Deutsche Bahn is not like some people, and it's a made up entity, of course, and there are professionals, or they're supposed to be professionals operating this kind of thing, right? And so there are missed chances there to either smooth this over much better or initially react much more conveniently and better for the Deutsche Bahn. And that's kind of why I said during my talk, have some people on your team that can, in the moment, I don't know, either like an artist like Neil or somebody else, a devil's advocate that will, maybe possibly rein in some of the instincts that the more business-like sides of us would like to bring to the table. So anyway, that was that. And yeah, just kind of catching up on a lot of things that have gone by there the last 20, 30 minutes. So.
Nadja, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just about to do something kind of similar, starting with, I'm just thinking about the first time I really thought about automation and AI, and that was when at the university, one of my colleagues was saying that she was so annoyed that she had to re-register every year for her parking. And the university knows where she lives, but when she asks for her parking space, every time she has to fill in her address. Why can't they automatically send it? Two different bureaus. The parking space is a different organization than the university, although the university hires them. So why couldn't they just get the information from the university, considering they work on the university? What is happening with your data? And she wanted to have it automated. 2 years later, it was automated. So the moment that you apply for a car, the separate organization immediately has access to that information. So in terms of data governance, people are asking for information without realizing the consequence of it. And then afterwards, now that we realize our data is literally the essence from which people are getting the funds from, now we have a problem with that, and we're backtracking to try and separate them again. So, governmental institutions have increasingly digitalized to ensure that there is more integrated systems. And as the moment where they have finally reached that point where the initial users asked for, we backtrack and say, well, actually, all these governmental institutions shouldn't have information. They should only have information that is relevant to me. So when we look at innovation, and when we look at the progress of and the manner in technology is developing, now there is this concept of transparency of access or privacy by design, but those weren't necessarily the concept that we started with. It was primarily access and transparency. So in that case, then you have choices. We were talking about Google and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, but instead of Google, you can choose to use an open source search engine, DuckDuckGo, for example, to ensure that you have some more security, some more privacy. And instead of using Google Chrome, you can use Mozilla Firefox. Those are alternative options then. But then that's the question. My energy is there because I'm very, very concerned about where my data is going and where my privacy is. Yes, I have Facebook. And like Neil was mentioning, the information that I put on there is to ensure that I have clients. At the end of the day, I do want my clients to be able to find me, and I make sure that the information that is out there and the content that people are reaching about me, so that we can find synergies that allow us to work together to build solutions that is relevant for them and in their community. So I do use then my social media accordingly to that, but then all the other information, my private information, I use Signal instead of WhatsApp, which is more secure, or even Telegram in some cases. So then it takes a lot of energy to be able to find all these different spaces to work in. And then what I wanted to comment on in terms of the attention span of the younger generations, I find it difficult to look at it in a silo that it's the young people that have specifically this attention span. I also think it depends on family dynamics. So if the family dynamics, it relies on the manner in which these discussions are being fostered. When I was young, my mother was one of the first digital nomads, and she was always home. So I've always had every discussion with her, and therefore I was able to have different things that my peers had. So my peers played a lot of Mario Kart, and the first time I played Mario Kart was when I was 23. So despite I own the game, I have the console, I have a variety of different Nintendos when they were still Nintendos, like Game Boys. But this was not a prominent part of my life, simply because I had access to my mother with whom I could have discussions, whether or not that's language, education, playing, going out. And I also see that more and more with younger families now, that that there is an active choice to engage in painting, in art, in music. But some families who rely on two incomes might not have that, and they have then more access to equipment like the internet, like games, because they are not able to provide that time investment, the financial investment to send them to particular classes to learn discipline. So I can play 8 hours of music without batting an eyelash, without food or anything, and just pure looking at that. I know people who can't even read a book for an hour. I think this depends on, I've been very blessed to have that kind of opportunity to have with my parents, whereas other parents have done our absolute best so that there's food on the table. So we can't rely solely on that. And then when you look at advertising, every advertising agent will say that all the marketing that goes towards kids is massive: games, computers, toys, and they have all the time to then having to navigate that and to find something that they enjoy and their friends enjoy. So if everybody is targeting them, then all the attention, of course, is going to be away from the things that matter, which are not specifically targeted at them, like the news, which is targeted for everybody. Then if we want to change the manner in which young people are getting this attention, then should there be limits on marketing? Should there be rules and bans on whether, or censorship even, whether or not children or young people should have access to that type of information? And then the access that they have, so parental controls. Should there be parental controls on computers to ensure that they only have access to educational websites so that promotes their learning, that gives them access? So these are then the other questions that raise it. And so we can't just look at, they have less attention per se, but who provides all that attention, who provides that care to be able for them to develop?
But if you look at figures, you must see the economical side. I mean, I'm coming from the economical and advertising side, and we do the analysis of what the groups do. I was for Otto, for instance, big e-commerce company, and I was the boss there for also the decision in which directions target groups go. And I can only say it's nice that you are by Signal and that you are looking for your own channels, but that would never be the point you would teach students in communication, in PR, or in advertising. You must teach them to go there where everybody goes. And if there's the hashtag on that day, then all the PR and the communicators, they try to take up the hashtag. It's the day of the dog, and then everybody says, this Trump is such a stupid dog. And then they have their attention because the word dog is in there. So it's different rules. And if you see it economically, you need the tribe so that you can sell your trousers or your shoes or your smartphones or whatever you're trying to sell. And if you're trying to sell your opinion or your message or your deep dive, then you have to go there where the people are. And that we have to learn. It is in the next years, it's getting more automatized and it's getting more artificial intelligence. And we in Japan, for instance, we always see that as a very radical example. There are young people, a high percentage of young people, they don't have any normal sexual contact to people anymore. They only have their computers and their sex systems on their bodies, and with their games they are playing, whatever. That is, of course, something which maybe won't come to Germany, but who knows where it goes to, maybe in other countries of the world. It's just the truth. That's why we have to talk about it.
But it's lucky then that we still have media literacy courses that are being taught in schools. So things like Signal and DuckDuckGo are being promoted, and increasingly this is becoming part of the curriculum. In the Netherlands, it's part of curriculum. In Germany, it isn't, simply because there are so many amazing NGOs, such as the Digitale, I'm not very good in German, Digitale Chancen-Stiftung. They do amazing media literacy courses where they go into schools and teach people how to be friendly and to have access to internet, to build and foster good relationships. But that still raises the question, in terms of the economic perspective. Yes, should it be targeted at children if you want to develop them further? Then it becomes a balancing act. We talked earlier about balance. It becomes a balancing act of, do we want to develop them in a particular way for them to be a particular economic aspect of our society, or do they want a political aspect of our society? Like, what is their role within this community? What is our choice as the role in their community? So then we set demands on every side, depending on the different perspectives. So we can't look at it in a particular silo. Like, when we look at from this perspective, then it has to be this way. Then we need to take the system into consideration and consider what are all the different facets that are affecting them, and what is then the best informed choice to move forward, rather than saying, well, if we are looking at this way, then this needs to be done. Then if we did this way, then this needs to be done. And that's then my biggest concern at the moment, that we are so divided in what we want to achieve from every different perspective and every different angle, that we don't take the time to look at what can we provide for our community, and how can we then move forward as to build solutions that support us in what we need to in essence survive the winter.
That's why I said we need
Ulrike, I'm very, very sorry. If maybe you can put it into your final statement, because we have only 8 minutes left, and I really want to have everybody with a final statement in the round. We all see that it's really worth discussing it and have a deep dialogue, and it won't be the last time. It's also worth reading the chat. We couldn't include in this dialogue. There are many interesting comments in it. So maybe Ulrike, you want to start with your final statement, maybe let you guide it by the question, what are you taking out, what you didn't bring before, or what do you want to highlight, just in a minute?
Yes, that is really interesting. Nadja said it already. It's a very, very important part of our purpose is to hire the education, to get information and education issues to the broad generation. And the question is how. And I learned energy goes where attention flows, or other way around, where energy flows, attention goes. We won't find it out tonight, but I can say if we have money and we have the companies on our side, that was the end of my presentation. And now when I'm listening to you all, then if we would have more money on the road, then we would also have the attention and the energy at once for the important things in society. And I think we can see it in the moment that companies are changing. They are all taking up purpose. They are taking up mission, and they can also help us to come into these circles where the attention is. And that's why my appel is to say, all of us has to work on the places where we are sitting. All of us can have an effort and hold together, communicate better, and educate the world better. And then it will get a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrike. So, Alex, you want to go next?
Yes, sure, I can. Just had to unmute. I think we've all said a lot, and there's a lot to digest. And the one thing that I wanted to throw out there is, you know, a little bit in retort to Ulrike with, you know, what different people are doing and whether those things are worthy or not. So one of the things that I've tried to also apply is to say, okay, you know what, these archetypal views, for example, they work both on a highbrow and a middle brow and a lowbrow level just the same. And so that's the first step. So in that sense, you can interest yourself, you know, find a framework, find a frame of reference that allows you to interest yourself, even in things that you basically, you know, disagree with or find, you know, like not useful enough. So let's give an example. In the games variety, the Fortnite thing, and became quite the phenomenon there a few years ago, and it still kind of is now. So that can, you know, if there is a social mass phenomenon, a pop cultural phenomenon, you would say in older terminology, then it usually behooves us to look at what's going on there, even if we disagree with it, or if we don't particularly like it, or if we don't find it interesting. So that's kind of like the maxim that I apply and that I like to live by in this regard. And then we may find out some things about what's going on social media. So anyway.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
So, Göran.
Yeah, what to say? I just can refer back to what I stated initially, that it's very important, like when we pursue this discussion or activity around it, to drop this Latin line of cui bono. So like, for whom is the competency? And it's like a very holistic competency of us as users, not even a threat to social media. Or is there probably like a possibility to go more hand in hand with the people that facilitate or maintain those platforms? Because you have to see, it's an insane accumulation of power, of data, of information. And I think we can see here like a proof of the assumption that data is the gold of the future. So, and we can see that right now. And the question is, so like if we want to have a fair share of that, or if we want just like to contribute like with our actions and thinking as the fuel to that. So I think that should be something to be taken on a more public agenda.
Thank you, Göran. So Nadja, do you want to have your final statement? You have to unmute.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So what I wanted to conclude with is that the areas that I spoke about primarily focused on access and information. Talking about access is not only the physical hardware or the infrastructure, but also the knowledge of where to go. And when we look at information, that we need to understand what this information means to you and how it impacts you, understanding what is fake and what is true to you. And when you have access and information, what do you choose to do with this? If you choose to build a community, or how do you become part of the community is then your choice, but let it be an informed choice. Try to make sure that you have every component that is available to you, and use that to what is necessary for your needs. Because you can, if you feel that you have made your choices well based on the information, that's the only way you can move forward, because otherwise you're always looking back and always having regrets. So try to look forward and try to be able to contribute where you can with the information that you have, and do your best to realize and understand that information, and ultimately be kind, because we present and understand information, not always realizing the context and not always understanding the background where it comes from. So having that patience and that understanding will help a lot of people, and will also help you to go further with all your needs and all your goals.
Thank you very much, Nadja. So last but not least, Neil. Yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you all for a very stimulating discussion. It strikes me to be similar to some of the Facebook discussions that I have with such a diverse range of opinions, directions, understandings, and different perspectives on the question, social media competence and communication in times of crisis. From my perspective, recognizing that we are in social ecological collapse, it's critical that we each develop our individual competence and that we learn how to work with others at whatever level of competence they have. So I like Göran's point there that recognises that. I love the fact that we've got the historical access to different archetypes and the research going on. I love the fact that we've got Nadja and others that are looking at positive examples of where social media coordination has enabled people in the midst of crisis to better organise rapid response and also to provide information critically. As I mentioned in my talk, I believe that we can facilitate emergence, and that if we, humanity, are going to have any chance of survival, that the key to our survival at whatever scale is to become more coherent in ourselves and our self-organisational models and our co-governance and our co-regulation. And that has to be in super coherence with Gaia, because Gaia bats last. She doesn't care how many hashtags we got. She doesn't care how many likes we've got. She doesn't care what pictures we posted on Instagram, right? So life begets conditions to life. So whatever we do, let's bring life to those conversations. Let's find ways to use our responsibility to create spaces of diversity that can be woven more eloquently and elegantly in ways that brings love to otherwise fractious relationships, point out known truths while letting go of attachment to any specific dogmatic conditions and outcomes, all the while still assisting individuals in social fields to make better sense in the best informed, future-oriented contexts. In short, what can we do together that we can't do alone, and how do we use the technology to do what we know we must do? How do we become who we know we need to become if we're not going to become extinct? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Neil, for this touching statement. So just a few minutes ago, Ralf, the husband of Gitta, wrote in the chat that Gitta sends so many greetings and she's so grateful. it was a pretty close histamine reaction, and she did not stop talking about you all, and she's resting now.
She's okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, lots of love, Gita. Thank you so much for bringing us all together.
So that is a wonderful closing. Thank you so much. And Neil has also, yes, ended with such a beautiful statement that actually, maybe just to pick up the question that he posed in the beginning is, why do I come here? And actually the intention why we all asked you to come here, why Gita has asked you to come here, is to bring us all one step ahead, as you said so beautifully. Let's co-imagine something better. Or to answer Ulrike's question of what can we do to turn communication more powerfully. So actually that is one of the first steps and means we are doing here, bringing people like you together, talking to each other, yes, trying to build something better on top of what you already do. And we are very, very thankful for tonight. Thank you for this inspiring talk. And we have a few others coming up as well. Actually, one more talk will be taking place tomorrow morning. This will be the last talk. And the other dialogues are also, oops, I am sorry. The other dialogues are also available on YouTube, on the media stream. And they're also definitely worthwhile to tune in and take a look at as well. So thank you for tonight. Have a safe trip to your bed, as we are all more or less coming from our homes. And talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Rebekka, and thank you, Kristin, and thank you all our love to Gita.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Lovely to meet you. I look forward to further interactions. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.